In the year 2024, 43,020 Americans over the age of 65 died from falling down. Let me say that again slowly, because it does not sound like it should be true. Not from cancer, not from heart disease, from falling, from the floor coming up to meet them. That is more than one person every 12 minutes, all day, all night, for the entire year. And the strange part, the part that ought to keep you up at night, except I would rather it help you fall asleep, is that the rate of this has climbed by 21% in just 6 years. It went up. In an age of medicine and hospitals and clever machines, the number of older people dying from the simple act of losing their balance went up. Now, if you happen to be somewhere in that window, 65 to 75, that number probably sits in your chest a little differently than it would have when you were 30. Maybe you have noticed something already. A little hitch when you rise up out of a soft chair. A pause, a gathering of yourself before you commit to standing. Legs that feel heavier on the staircase than they felt 5 years ago, as if somebody quietly added sand to your shoes while you were not looking. I want to tell you plainly that is not your imagination playing tricks. That is a real thing happening in a real machine. And it is worth understanding, not to frighten you, but because a thing you understand is a thing that loses most of its power to frighten you. But here is what I want you to hold on to right from the start before we go anywhere at all. This is not written in stone. It is not a one-way door that clangs shut behind you on your 65th birthday. And it is not too late. It is genuinely, honestly not too late. And I am going to show you the evidence for that, real numbers from real experiments, not a pep talk. The answer is not complicated, and it is not expensive, and it does not require a machine or a membership or a young man shouting at you. So let us begin where everybody begins, where the doctor begins, where your own good common sense begins. Keep the body moving, walk every day, use it or lose it. You have heard it 1,000 times, and it has the lovely ring of something that is simply true. Motion is life. A rolling stone gathers no moss. The body is like a hinge, and a hinge that swings every day does not rust shut. So you lace up your shoes in the morning, and you go out and walk the neighborhood, past the same fences and the same dogs and the same fellow watering his roses, and you come home a little warm and a little proud, and you think, good, I did the thing. I kept the machine oiled. And you should feel proud, because you did do a good thing. I am not going to take that away from you. Not yet, anyway. And when you look at the sheer size of this falling business, you can see exactly why sitting still gets all the blame and why moving around gets all the credit. Let me give you the scale of it, because the scale is genuinely staggering, and I think most people have no idea. More than 14 million older adults in the United States report falling every single year. 14 million. That is 1 out of every 4 people past 65. Look at 3 of your friends, and then look at yourself, and statistically, 1 of the 4 of you is going down this year. In the year 2023, more than 3.85 million older folks were treated in emergency rooms for injuries from a fall. And it is not only bodies that get hurt. In 2022, the money spent on treating non-fatal falls in people over 65 reached $80 billion. $80 billion, with a B, in a single year. And the people who count these things expect it to sail past $101 billion a year by the year 2030. Over the last 10 years, deaths from falls went up by 51%, more than half again as many. And trips to the emergency room went up by 38%. So here is a thing that is getting worse, quickly, in a wealthy country full of doctors, and when something is getting worse and you want to know why, the easiest story to reach for is the one that says, well, people just are not moving enough. They sit, they soften, they go to seed, so move, get up, walk. And that story is so reasonable, so satisfying, that almost nobody stops to poke at it. Which is exactly why we are going to poke at it, but gently, and not yet. Because first I owe the old idea a fair hearing. It would be cheap of me to knock it down before I have built it up, and I do not think the people who believe it are foolish. They are not foolish at all. They noticed something real. Let me show you the real thing they noticed, so you feel the full weight of why walking seems like the whole answer. Somewhere around your 50th birthday, give or take, a slow tide begins to go out. Your muscle mass, the actual physical stuff of your muscles, the meat of you, begins to decrease by about 1 to 2% every year. 1 or 2% does not sound like much. It is not much. In a year. You would never feel it in a year. It is like watching the tide go out by staring at the water. Nothing seems to happen. But come back in an hour, come back in a decade, and whole rocks have appeared that used to be underwater. 1% a year for 20 years is a fifth of the whole thing, quietly gone. And so it makes perfect sense to say, well, if the muscle is slipping away because I am not using it hard enough, then let me use it. Let me walk. Let me keep the tide from going out by wading in every morning. And there is comfort waiting for you in the numbers too, real comfort, which is part of why the old idea feels so safe. Because this thing the doctors call sarcopenia, which is just a fancy Greek word meaning poverty of the flesh, the real serious wasting of the muscle, is actually rather rare in your age group. In people 65 to 69, full-blown sarcopenia shows up in only about 5%. 5 out of 100. That means 95 out of 100 do not have it. So you can tell yourself, and it is not a lie. The serious problem is uncommon at my age, and surely part of the reason it is uncommon is that people like me keep moving. The walkers are winning. The evidence seems to be right there in the low numbers. Stay active, stay in the 95%. It hangs together beautifully. It is a lovely, sturdy, sensible little house of an idea, and millions of people live inside it, and sleep soundly inside it. I am going to spend the next while very carefully, very quietly, showing you that this house has a crack running right up the middle of it. Not because the people who built it were stupid. I keep saying that, and I mean it. They were smart, and they were paying attention, and everything they saw was real. Muscle really does shrink. Motion really is better than stillness. The falling really is an epidemic. Every single brick in that house is a true brick. It is just that they were missing a room. There is a whole room in the machine of your body that walking never enters, never lights up, never touches. And the trouble, the falling, the heaviness on the stairs, the hesitation before the chair, most of that trouble lives in the room that walking cannot reach. But I am getting ahead of myself, and this is meant to be an unhurried evening. So let me plant just one small seed now, one little splinter, and then we will go back and look slowly and carefully at how this whole beautiful machine is put together, one fiber at a time, and how it ages, and why the numbers do what they do. Here is the splinter. Hold it lightly. When they measure how fast your muscles are fading, they measure two different things. They measure how much muscle you have, the size, the mass, the amount of meat, and they measure how strong you are, how much force you can actually produce. And you would think those two would fall together hand in hand at the same rate. The muscle shrinks by so much, the strength drops by the same so much. That would be tidy. That would be sensible. They do not fall together. Not even close. The strength goes away 2 to 5 times faster than the muscle does. Read that again in your mind. You are losing your strength somewhere between twice and 5 times as fast as you are losing the actual muscle, which means the strength is leaking out of a bucket that still looks mostly full. The meat is still there more or less sitting on the bone, but something inside it, some quality, some spark, some liveliness, is draining away far quicker than the size would ever tell you. And walking, that faithful morning walk you are so proud of, and should be, does almost nothing to plug that particular leak. We are going to spend this whole long evening finding out what that leak is, where it lives, and exactly what you can do in your own kitchen with a chair you already own to close it back up. But there is no rush. Let us start with a single fiber, thinner than a hair, and watch what time does to it. Picture that single fiber sitting on the bone. It is a long, thin thread, and it is not a dead rope. It is a living, twitching, breathing thing packed end to end with tiny motors, millions of them, all lined up in rows like little oarsmen in a very long boat. When you decide to stand, a signal comes down from the spinal cord, and all those oarsmen pull at once, and the thread shortens, and you rise. That is all a muscle is, a crowd of oarsmen who pull when the coxswain shouts. Now, there are two very different kinds of these threads braided together inside your thigh, and the whole secret of this evening lives in the difference between them. One kind is slow and patient. It sips its fuel gently, it almost never tires. It is the fiber that carries you mile after mile on that morning walk without complaint. We call it the slow one, the enduring one, the marathoner. It is wonderful. It is also, for tonight's purposes, not the fiber in trouble. It stays fairly loyal to you across the decades. It is the tortoise, and the tortoise ages slowly. The other kind is the sprinter. It is thick, it is greedy, it burns its fuel in a sudden bright rush, and it tires almost immediately. But oh, when it fires hard and fast. This is the fiber you use when you leap, when you catch yourself, when you shove off the ground to climb a stair two at a time. We call it the fast one, the fast twitch fiber, the type 2 fiber. And here is the cruelty of the arithmetic of aging. Time does not touch both kinds equally. Time comes for the sprinter first. Now let me show you what that looks like under a microscope, because somebody actually went and looked, and the numbers are quietly astonishing. Imagine two little slivers of thigh muscle laid side by side on glass. One came from a young man of about 23, the other from an older man of about 71. You stain them, you shine a light through, and you measure the width of the fast twitch fibers, the sprinters in each. The old man's sprinter fibers are 29% smaller across. Nearly a third of their girth simply gone. And meanwhile, if you look at the slow fibers, the tortoises, they are barely changed at all. The body, it seems, plays favorites, and it does not play them in your favor. It lets the sprinter wither while the marathoner keeps its shape. And it is not that you have fewer threads. That is the part people get wrong. You did not lose the oarsmen by the thousands, at least not mostly. What happened is subtler and sneakier. Each sprinter thread got thinner, fewer oars in the boat, or rather weaker oars, thinner oars, oars that have lost their heft. Stack that up across the whole muscle and you can measure it with a tape, in a manner of speaking. The whole cross-section of the thigh, the quadriceps, in the older men came out to about 68 square centimeters. In the younger men, about 80. So the thigh itself is a good deal thinner through the middle, and almost all of that missing bulk was stolen specifically from the fast fibers, the very ones you need for anything sudden. Now sit with that for a moment, because it explains something you have felt, but perhaps never named. Have you noticed that you can still walk for an hour comfortably, no trouble at all, and yet you hesitate at a curb? That you can stroll the whole neighborhood, but rising from a low couch takes a little grunt and a little rock forward that it never used to? That is not weakness of the tortoise. Your endurance is fine. That is the sprinter, gone thin. The slow fiber carries you along the flat, patient and tireless, and fools you into thinking all is well. And then the moment comes that asks for a fast, hard push, and the fast fiber, the withered one, is not there to answer. The morning walk exercises the fiber that was never really in danger, and leaves untouched the fiber that is quietly disappearing. That is the leak. That is where it lives, right there in the thinning body of the sprinter thread. But here, and this is the first gentle turn of the whole evening back toward hope, here is the thing they also found on that glass. They took older people, people whose fast fibers had already thinned by that dismal amount, and they put them through a program of lifting. Real resistance. Push against something that pushes back, and they biopsied again. And the fast twitch fibers had grown, not by some trivial sliver, by about 24% give or take. The sprinter, which age had been slowly starving, plumped back up when it was finally asked to do the one thing it exists to do, which is to work hard against the load. The oarsmen thickened their arms again. The boat got its power back. This is not a fiber that has died. It is a fiber that has been laid off, sent home, told it is no longer needed, and it has simply gotten out of shape sitting on the couch of your daily life. Call it back to work and it comes back. So you begin to see why the morning walk, lovely as it is, cannot fix this. Walking is a conversation held entirely with the tortoise. It is slow, it is rhythmic, it is gentle, it repeats and repeats at the same easy pace, and that easy pace is precisely the pace the slow fiber loves and the fast fiber ignores. You could walk from here to the next town and back, and the sprinter fiber would barely stir, because you never once asked it for a sudden, hard, near maximal effort. It only wakes for that. It only wakes for the shove, the leap, the heave, the fast rise, and if you never give it that, it takes your silence as permission to keep shrinking. Let me put it another way, because I want this one to really stick before you drift off. Suppose you had two employees. One does steady, quiet, reliable work all day, every day, at a calm pace, and you keep him busy from morning to night. The other is your emergency man. He sits idle most of the time, but when the alarm rings, he is the one who lifts the fallen beam off the floor in a single explosive heave. Now, if year after year you keep the first man busy and you never once sound the alarm, what happens to the emergency man? He loses his strength. He gets soft. He forgets what his job even is. And then one day the beam falls, the alarm finally rings, and he cannot lift it, because you let him go slack for a decade while praising yourself for keeping the other fellow so busy. Your morning walk keeps the steady man employed. It does absolutely nothing for the emergency man. And the emergency man is the one who catches you when your toe snags the rug. You feel the shape of the argument tightening now, don't you? We started the evening with a comfortable, sensible belief that keeping active is enough, that motion is medicine, that the walk is the whole prescription. And I told you that belief was smart, and it was, and the people who hold it are not fools. But we have now found the first real crack running through it, and it is a wide one. Motion is not one thing. There is slow motion and there is fast motion, and they speak to two entirely different populations of fiber, and only one of those populations is the one that is quietly leaving you. To keep doing the slow thing, and only the slow thing, is to send letters faithfully every morning to the neighbor who never moved away, while the neighbor who is packing his bags gets nothing from you at all. And I have not even told you the strangest part yet, because you might reasonably say, all right, fine, so I lost some size in the sprinter fiber, 29%. That is bad, but surely that is the whole story. Surely the strength I have lost matches the bulk I have lost. And no. Do you remember the number from before we paused? The strength drains out 2 to 5 times faster than the size. Even the shrinking sprinter fiber does not shrink fast enough to explain how much power you have actually lost. The thinning of the fiber is real, but it is not the whole crime. There is another thief in the house, and this one does not live in the muscle at all. This one lives higher up, in the wiring, in the cables that carry the coxswain's shout down to the oarsmen. And when we go looking for that second thief, in a little while we are going to find something about the nerves themselves, about how the signal gets sent and how it fades. That is going to change the way you think about what strength even is. But we will get there slowly, in our own time. For now, just hold the picture of that one thin fiber, the sprinter grown quiet, waiting to be called back to work. It is still there. It is still willing. It has simply been waiting a very long time for you to ask. So let us go up the cables now, gently, following the shout from the coxswain back toward the mouth that makes it, because I told you there was a second thief, and I do not want to leave you wondering in the dark about where he hides. He does not hide in the muscle at all. He hides in the nerve. And to understand him, you have to understand a small and rather beautiful piece of plumbing that nobody ever told you about, even though you have been carrying millions of them around inside your legs your whole life. Here is the idea. A muscle is not one thing that gets one command. A muscle is a crowd of fibers, and that crowd is divided into gangs. One nerve cell, one single nerve reaching down from the spinal cord, takes charge of a little gang of fibers, and it is the boss of that gang and of no others. When that nerve fires, every fiber in its gang contracts all together, all at once, like a squad of rowers who only ever answer to their own sergeant. We give this little arrangement a name. We call it a motor unit. One nerve and the fibers it owns. That is the true working piece of a muscle, not the fiber, the motor unit. And here is the thing that is going to sit with you. When you are young, you have a certain number of these sergeants, each with a good crowd of fibers under him. As the years go by, quietly, without any announcement, some of the sergeants die. The nerve cell itself withers back and stops sending its signal, and the little gang it commanded is suddenly left with no orders at all. Now think about what that means for those poor fibers. They are not sick, they are not weak, they are perfectly good fibers, but they have lost their boss. Nobody is telling them when to pull, and a fiber that is never told to pull is a fiber that slowly gives up and fades. This is a word worth knowing, and it is a plain word once you unwrap it. We call it denervation. It simply means the nerve has let go. Now the body is not stupid about this, and this is the part I love, because it shows you how clever the machinery is even in its decline. When a gang loses its sergeant, a neighboring sergeant, one whose nerve is still alive and firing, will sometimes reach out. It sends out little sprouts, tiny new branches from its own cable, and it adopts the orphan fibers. It takes them into its own gang. So the fibers are rescued. They get a boss again. They get their orders again. And you might think, well, that is a happy ending, no harm done. But look closer, because there is a cost hidden in the rescue, and the cost is the whole story. The sergeant who adopts the orphans now commands a much bigger crowd than he used to. His gang has swollen. And here is the trouble. Many of the sergeants who die off are the sergeants of the fast gangs, the ones who commanded those sprinter fibers, the type 2 fibers we spent so long admiring. And who adopts their orphans? Very often it is a slow sergeant, an endurance sergeant, one built for the marathon. So a sprinter fiber gets rescued by a marathon boss. It survives, but it is retrained. It starts to behave more like its new companions. The gang loses its sharpness. It can still pull, but it cannot pull fast. The whole crowd gets slower and more sluggish and more alike, and the crispness, the snap, the explosive readiness that used to live in those fast gangs quietly drains out of the leg. We have a phrase for this reshuffling. We say the motor units are remodeled and that the fibers become grouped, the fast ones and slow ones all mixed and clumped together under fewer, larger, slower bosses. And now you can feel, I think, why I told you at the very start that the strength was leaving your legs faster than the meat was. Because a muscle can weigh almost the same as it did 10 years ago, it can look the same in a mirror, and yet inside it the command structure has been gutted. Sergeants gone. Gangs merged. The fast squads swallowed up by slow ones. You have not lost so much of the army. You have lost the officers who knew how to make it charge. That is the second thief. And you see now why walking, faithful, honest walking, does not catch him. When you walk, you are asking the slow sergeants to do their steady, patient work, and they are happy to oblige, and they stay employed and content. But the fast sergeants, the ones under threat, the ones whose gangs are being dissolved out from under them, are almost never called. A slow rhythmic stroll simply does not need them. And a sergeant who is never called, like a fiber that is never told to pull, drifts toward the exit. You cannot save a soldier you never summon to the field. Now there is a third piece to this, and it is subtler still, and it is about how loud the shout is. Even the sergeants who remain, even the good living nerves with their gangs intact, do not shout as loudly in an older body as they once did. When you really try to make a muscle contract with everything you have, your spinal cord is supposed to fire those nerves in a fast, insistent drum roll. Faster and faster, so the fibers barely get to relax between commands and their pulls stack up into one great smooth maximum effort. In a young body, that drum roll comes fierce and quick. In an older body, it comes a little slower, a little more hesitant, and the ceiling of the effort comes down. We call this the neural drive, and it too fades with the years. So it is not only that you have fewer sergeants, and not only that they command the wrong sort of gang. It is also that the general at the top, the will itself made physical, does not pound the drum quite so hard. Put these three together and stand back and look at what you have. Fewer motor units because some of the nerves have died. The surviving units remodeled, the fast gangs swallowed into slow ones, the crispness gone. and a quieter drive from above, a softer drum roll, a lower ceiling on the whole effort. Not one thief. 3. Working the same house on the same night, and every one of them living not in the muscle, but in the wiring that runs the muscle. This is why the strength falls 2 to 5 times faster than the size. The size is just the meat. The strength depends on the officers and the orders, and it is the officers and the orders that are quietly disappearing while the meat is still mostly there. And I want you to feel the weight of that, but gently, because there is nothing here to be frightened of at this hour. I want you to feel it because it overturns something you probably believed without ever deciding to believe it. You probably thought that getting weak with age was a matter of the flesh wasting away, like a candle burning down, some slow melting of the body that there was nothing to be done about. And that is simply not the shape of it. The shape of it is a loss of command. And command, unlike a burned candle, can be recalled. A nerve that still lives can be made to fire more often. A drum roll that has gone soft can be taught to pound again. A fast sergeant who has been sitting idle for 15 years, half forgotten, can be sent an order tomorrow morning, and he will grumble, and he will be rusty, and then he will answer. This is the astonishing thing that the biopsies showed us, the thing I have been holding just out of sight, waiting for the right moment. When they took older people in their 70s, and asked them to lift real loads against real resistance, those shrunken sprinter fibers grew back. Not a little, by nearly a quarter of their size. The sergeants were recalled. The gangs woke up. The wiring, which everyone had written off as a one-way road running downhill into the dark, turned out to run both ways. So the collapse of the old idea is not a sad collapse. Keep that close as you drift. The comfortable belief that staying active is enough has fallen, yes. It has fallen, because staying active only ever spoke to the slow half of the story and left the fast half to rot in silence. But what stands in the ruins is not despair. What stands there is an invitation, and it is a very specific one, written in the language of nerves and gangs and drum rolls. It says, in effect, you have been talking to the wrong soldiers. You have been polite and faithful and patient, walking your loops every morning, and the whole time the men who guard you against the fall, the fast ones, the explosive ones, the ones who catch you in that quarter of a second when the rug slides, have been standing at the far end of the barracks, wondering why nobody ever calls their names. In a little while I am going to tell you exactly how to call them, and it is simpler and quieter and more ordinary than you would ever guess, and it happens in a kitchen with a chair. But before we get to the how, we have to look hard at the single most common thing you do with those fast soldiers every single day, the thing you have done 10,000 times and never once watched. You stand up, you rise from a chair, and in that plain, unremarkable act, done well or done poorly, is written the entire secret of the power we have been chasing. So let us slow it down, all the way down, until we can see it happen one hinge at a time. Picture a hinge, a good oiled hinge on a garden gate. When you push the gate, the hinge does not think, it does not strain, it simply turns, and the gate swings, and that is the whole business. Now I want you to think of yourself sitting there in the chair as a creature made of 3 hinges stacked one on top of the other. There is a hinge at your ankle where the foot meets the leg. There is a hinge at your knee, and there is a hinge at your hip where the thigh meets the body. 3 hinges and a long swinging weight on top of them called you, and the whole trick of standing up is to unfold those 3 hinges in the right order, at the right moment, with the right push. It sounds like nothing. Watch a small child do it and it is nothing. But let us take it apart, because in the taking apart we will see precisely where the years do their quiet damage. The first thing that happens before you rise a single inch is that you lean forward. You may never have noticed this. Try it later gently in your own chair. You do not go straight up like a rocket. You cannot. If you tried to stand while sitting bolt upright, with your back against the chair, you would simply press yourself harder into the seat and go nowhere, because all of your weight would be sitting behind your feet, and you cannot lift a load that is behind the place where you are trying to stand. So the body, wise old engineer that it is, tips the whole trunk forward from the hip. Your nose travels out over your knees. Your weight, which was resting comfortably on the chair, begins to slide forward toward your feet. And this leaning, this first tipping, has a name worth remembering. It is the gathering of momentum. You are borrowing a little fall. You are letting yourself topple forward on purpose, just a bit, so that the falling can be turned into rising. That is the first phase, and here is the lovely thing about it. It costs almost no strength. It is a small controlled lean, a bit of gravity spent freely, and even a very weak person can do it. So the first phase hides nothing, it tells no tales. A frail leg and a strong leg lean forward in very nearly the same way. The trouble comes next. The second phase is the instant of liftoff. Your weight has slid forward until it hangs right over your feet, poised, and now the buttocks leave the seat. This is the hinge moment, the moment the chair stops helping you and gravity takes the whole load. And notice something that took researchers careful measurement to pin down. At this exact instant, your ankle is doing something peculiar. The shin is rotating forward over the foot, the knee is traveling out ahead, and the ankle bends in the direction we call dorsiflexion, which is just a long word for the foot flexing up toward the shin, the angle at the front of the ankle closing. That bend at the ankle is what keeps you from pitching over onto your face. It is a small joint doing a large and thankless job of steering, holding the tower steady in the half second when the tower is most likely to fall. And in older legs, the torque at that ankle, the twisting force the ankle can produce, is measurably lower. The ankle has gone soft on the job. It cannot push back against the forward tumble as crisply as it once did, and so the whole rising begins to wobble at its very foundation. Then comes the third phase, and this is the one that separates the vigorous from the struggling. This is extension. All three hinges must now open together and open fast. The hip drives the trunk upright, the knee straightens the leg, the trunk itself comes up from its forward lean. And all of it happens against gravity, lifting the entire mass of you from a folded crouch to a standing tower in about a second, sometimes less. This third phase is not a leisurely thing. It cannot be. If you open the hinges too slowly, you stall in the middle, half up and half down, quivering, and the body hates that stalled position because it is the weakest and most dangerous place to be. So the extension wants to be quick. It wants a burst. It wants, in a word, power. Not the slow, patient strength of carrying a suitcase across a station. The sudden strength of a spring letting go. And which shoulders do we need for a spring letting go? The fast ones. The type 2 fibers. The very ones that the walking never called. The very ones that shrank by nearly a third while nobody was looking. Now watch what an older body does when those fast fibers have gone quiet and the ankle has gone soft. It compensates. And the way it compensates is both clever and heartbreaking. Since the legs can no longer supply enough of that explosive push in the extension phase, the body borrows more from the very first phase. It leans further forward. It throws the trunk out harder, further over the knees, to build up a bigger swing of momentum, a bigger borrowed fall, because it must make up in borrowed motion what the legs can no longer supply in raw power. You have all seen this. You have seen an older person rock back once, twice, gathering themselves, and then throw the upper body forward and heave up out of the chair with a lurch. That rocking and that heave are not laziness, and they are not habit. They are an engineering solution. The body is a brilliant problem solver, and faced with weak legs, it has invented a workaround using the trunk as a pendulum. The trouble is that the workaround is fragile. Lean on momentum instead of power, and you are one badly placed foot, one slippery floor, one unexpected softness in the chair cushion away from having that borrowed fall become a real one. And there is more. When the legs are uncertain, the body does another thing that seems helpful and is quietly costly. It tightens everything at once. Around the ankle, around the knee, the muscles on the front and the muscles on the back both fire together. We call this coactivation, the agonist and the antagonist both pulling at the same time, and it is the body's way of stiffening a joint it no longer trusts to move smoothly, like a nervous driver riding the brake and the gas together to keep the car from lurching. It buys a little stability, but it wastes enormous energy, and it makes every movement slower and stiffer and more tiring, because half your muscle is fighting the other half. The young leg does not do this. The young leg lets the right muscle fire and the opposing muscle relax, clean and economical, like a good dancer who is loose everywhere except exactly where the tension is needed. The aging leg clenches all over, unsure which part to trust, and pays for that uncertainty in slowness. So look at what we have now uncovered, hinge by hinge. The whole graceful business of standing up depends, right at its heart, in that third explosive phase, on precisely the muscle quality that fades first and fades fastest, and that ordinary gentle walking never touches. The extension against gravity is a power move. The type 2 fibers drive the power move. Those fibers shrink with the years. And when they shrink, the ankle steering goes soft, the trunk starts throwing itself forward in a risky borrowed fall, and every joint clenches against itself in a wasteful nervous grip. Every piece of the picture we have been building fits into this one plane motion. The chair test we spoke of earlier, the counting of stands in 30 seconds, is not really a test of your legs in the vague way people imagine. It is a direct and honest measurement of exactly this third phase, repeated over and over, faster or slower depending on how much of that fast explosive quality you have kept. When we counted the stands, we were counting power. We just did not say so at the time. And here is where the whole argument we have been unwinding finally turns from complaint into remedy. Because once you understand that standing up is a power move, you understand something wonderful. You do not need a gymnasium to train it. You do not need a barbell, or a machine with cables, or a young trainer shouting numbers. You have, sitting in your own kitchen, the single most perfectly designed piece of training equipment for exactly this purpose that has ever existed. It is the chair you already own. The same chair we use to measure the trouble is the chair we will use to mend it. Because the motion that reveals the weakness is the very motion that, done with the right intent, builds the strength back. And that phrase, done with the right intent, is going to turn out to carry almost all the weight of what comes next, because it is not the standing up that trains the fast fibers. Millions of people stand up from chairs a dozen times a day and grow no stronger at all. It is how you stand up. It is the speed you put into that third phase, the willingness to make it a small, controlled explosion instead of a slow, grinding heave. So let us take that ordinary chair, and this time, instead of asking it to show us the damage, let us ask it to undo the damage. One deliberate, unhurried, curiously quick rise at a time. So sit down again, all the way back, the way you would if you meant to stay a while. Let your weight settle. Feel the seat take you. And now, before you rush, notice the ground under your feet. Slide them back a little so your heels sit just behind your knees, because the geometry matters, and we will come to the geometry properly in a moment. Fold your hands across your chest if you like, or let them hang. It does not much matter yet. What matters is the intention you are about to pour into the next second and a half of your life. Because here is the thing the fast fibers respond to, and it is almost the only thing they respond to. They respond to being asked, briefly and honestly, to move something quickly. Not far. Not for long. Quickly. So lean forward. That is the first part, the leaning, the borrowing of a little momentum from your own upper body, tipping your nose out over your toes so that your center of gravity comes forward to where your legs can actually get underneath it. Everyone does this. Older bodies do more of it, lean a little farther, because they are quietly compensating, borrowing more trunk momentum to make up for the leg power they no longer trust. We noticed that already. But now you are going to do it on purpose, cleanly, and then, at the bottom of that lean, at the moment your weight comes off the seat, you are going to stand up as though the chair had suddenly become slightly too warm to sit on. Not violently, not with a lurch that throws you off balance, but briskly, with snap, with the willingness to make it quick. And then you sit back down slowly. That part is just as important, and I want to dwell on it, because most people get this exactly backward. They heave themselves up slowly, grinding, and then they drop back down fast, collapsing into the seat, letting gravity do the work. You are going to reverse that. Up quick, down slow. Up is where you build the power, the watts, the force multiplied by speed. Down slow is where something else happens. Something the researchers call eccentric work, the muscle lengthening under load while it still holds you, controlling the descent instead of surrendering to it. There was a study, 90 older adults, average age of about 67, 8 weeks of training 3 times a week, and the group that emphasized this slow lowering, this eccentric part, grew their muscle thickness by almost 9%, while a band-only group grew about 4%. Both got stronger. But the lowering, the patient-controlled descent, added something extra, so do not waste it. Do not fall into the chair. Lower yourself into it like you are setting down something fragile that happens to be you. Up quick, down slow. That is the whole secret, and it is almost embarrassing how small it is. You already own the equipment. You have already done the motion 10,000 times. All I am asking you to change is the tempo and the intent. Now, how many? This is where people want a magic number, and I can give you one that is grounded in something real, not pulled from the air. Remember the test, the 30 seconds, the counting of how many times you could rise. A man of 65 to 69 ought to be able to manage somewhere between 12 and 18 in that half minute. A woman of the same age, somewhere between 11 and 16. Those German researchers who measured over 1,600 people found the averages sitting right around 13 for both. So the number lives in that neighborhood. When you train, you do not need to chase 30 seconds of misery. You do a handful, maybe 8 or 10 good ones, each one crisp on the way up, each one slow on the way down, and then you rest, and then you do another handful. 2 or 3 little clusters. That is a set, and the science on this is refreshingly modest in its demands. 2 sessions a week. 2 or 3 sets. 7 to 9 repetitions in a set. That is the dose that the pooled trials keep landing on over and over for building real strength in older muscle. 2 days a week. Not 2 hours a day. 2 sessions. And notice what a relief that is, if you are dreading some punishing regime. The muscle does not want to be flogged daily. It wants to be asked clearly a couple of times a week, and then it wants to be left alone to rebuild. The rebuilding happens on the days you are not training. The stimulus is the ask. The growth is the rest. Now, if you cannot rise from the chair without pushing off with your hands, that is fine. That is information, not failure. Push off with your hands. Use the armrests. Use a countertop in front of you. Take some of the load with your arms and let your legs do what they can of the rest, and quick on the way up even so, and slow on the way down even so. And over weeks the day will come when your hands rest lightly, and then when they lift away entirely and hover, and then when you fold them across your chest and forget they were ever needed. This is the ladder. You climb it 1 rung at a time. There is no shame on any rung. The only mistake is refusing to step onto the ladder at all. And if the chair becomes easy, and I promise you it can become easy faster than you would believe, then you do not need to buy anything or join anywhere. You simply make the physics harder. Sit in a lower chair, so your legs must lift you through a greater angle. Or hold something, a jug of water, a bag of books, hugged to your chest, so your legs must move more mass at the same brisk speed. Because power is force times velocity, and if you keep the velocity, the snap, the quickness, and you add force, more weight to move, you are climbing exactly the curve that the trials climbed. The famous finding, the one where the Leighton fast group did so much better, they were working at only about 40% of their absolute maximum. Light. Not heavy, but fast. 40% of what you could grind out once moved quickly, explained more than half the difference in how fast people actually walked. Half. From a load so light, you would think it hardly counted. So that is the chair, and the chair is the heart of it. But your legs do not end at the knees, and the trouble, when it comes, so often comes from lower down, from the ankle, from the calf, from that small hinge at the bottom that steers the whole tower of you. Let me give you the second daily thing, and it is even simpler than the first. Stand behind your chair. Rest your fingertips on its back, lightly, just for balance, not for lifting. And rise up onto the balls of your feet. Lift your heels off the floor. Feel your calves take your weight. Feel yourself grow an inch or 2 taller up onto your toes. And here is the part that matters, the part that turns an ordinary heel raise into something that trains the quality we actually lost. Go up fast. as fast as you safely can. There was a study, 34 healthy older men, average age around 73, 8 weeks of exactly this, at home, 3 sets of 10, 3 times a week, and the whole instruction was to do the lifting part as fast as possible. And the rate at which they could develop force through the ankle improved by about 21%. 21% in 8 weeks from raising up onto your toes quickly in your own kitchen. And here is the beautiful, strange detail. Their muscles did not get measurably bigger. The architecture barely changed. The improvement was almost entirely in the wiring, in the nervous system relearning how to fire the muscle quickly, how to summon those fast fibers in a hurry, which tells you something profound. Some of what you lost was never the meat. Some of it was the message. And the message can be retrained. Up fast onto the toes, down slow onto the heels, the same tempo as the chair, the same honest quickness on the way up, the same patient control on the way down. And why the ankle? Why fuss over this little hinge? Because when your foot catches on the edge of a rug, when the ground betrays you for a fraction of a second, it is the ankle that fires first, the ankle that makes the first correction before your knee or your hip even know there is a problem. The whole cascade of catching yourself begins down there at the floor in that quick reflexive push, and a stiff, slow, weakly wired ankle simply cannot answer in time. There was work showing that just stretching the ankle, 30 minutes a day for 3 weeks, improved not only how far the ankle could bend but the person's balance, their walking speed, the steadiness of their gait. So the ankle is not a footnote. The ankle is where a great many falls are won or lost in the first tenth of a second, long before you consciously know you have begun to fall. So now you have 2 things, and they cost nothing, and they need no gymnasium. The quick rise from the chair up fast and down slow, a couple of days a week, in little clusters of 8 or 10, and the quick rise onto the toes, every day if you like, because the ankle tolerates and even enjoys frequent gentle work. 2 motions. 1 tempo. Quick up, slow down. That tempo is the whole philosophy hidden inside a single word, and the word, you will remember, was intent. But we are not finished, because there is a third quality, one we have circled but not yet landed on, a quality that is neither strength nor power, but the thing that keeps all that strength and power standing upright in the first place. And for that we have to leave the kitchen and travel to Portland, Oregon, and watch 256 older people do something that looks at first like the slowest and gentlest thing in the world. Picture the room. It is plain, a little worn, the kind of place where folding chairs get stacked against the wall. And in the middle of it, moving as if they were underwater, are these older people, 70 years old, some of them 90, shifting their weight from one foot to the other, turning slowly, lifting an arm the way you might lift a cup you did not want to spill. To a young man rushing past the window, it would look like nothing at all. It would look like the opposite of exercise. No sweat, no strain, no clanking iron, no gasping for breath. Just slow, deliberate, unhurried motion, the whole body flowing from one shape into the next like water finding its level. And yet what was happening in that room over 6 months, 3 times a week, was one of the most important experiments anyone has ever done on the aging body. So let us watch it carefully, because it is going to teach us the third thing, the thing that is neither strength nor power, and without it the other 2 are like a beautifully built house standing on soft mud. The people running this study, in Portland, Oregon, in the year 2005, took 256 older adults, everyone between 70 and 92 years of age, and they split them into 2 groups. One group learned the slow Chinese art, the one called Tai Chi, in a particular gentle style. The other group did a program of stretching, ordinary, sensible stretching, the sort of thing a reasonable doctor might recommend. Both groups showed up 3 times a week. Both groups moved their bodies. Both groups were, by any everyday definition, staying active. And here we are again, you see, right back at the comfortable old idea we spent so long taking apart. Staying active, keeping loose, moving the joints. If the old idea were the whole story, the 2 groups should have come out more or less the same. They did not come out the same. They did not come out anywhere near the same. Over those 6 months, the researchers simply counted who fell and how often and how badly. In the stretching group, by the end, nearly half of them had fallen at least once, 46 out of every 100. In the Tai Chi group, it was 28 out of every 100. And when you looked at the people who fell more than once, the repeat fallers, the ones truly in trouble, the Tai Chi group had cut that risk by more than half. 55% lower. Slower, gentler, no weights at all, and yet the injuries told the same story. The bad falls, the ones that broke something or drew blood, happened to about 7 of every 100 in the Tai Chi group and to about 18 of every 100 among the stretchers. More than twice as many on the side that looked to the man at the window like they were working harder. Now sit with that for a moment, because it is genuinely strange. Stretching is not nothing. Loosening a stiff ankle, as we saw, is real and it helps. And yet here is this soft floating, almost lazy-looking practice, beating it so badly that the numbers are not even close. What on earth is Tai Chi doing that stretching is not? What is the hidden ingredient? Because it is not building big muscles. Not in 6 months of that. It is not driving the heart to pound. It is doing something else. Something we have been dancing around this whole time without naming it, and the name of it is balance. But I do not mean balance the way you might casually mean it. I mean something much more alive than standing still on one foot. Think about what your body is actually doing every single second you are upright, even now, even sitting. You imagine you are still. You are not still. You are falling and catching yourself, hundreds of times a minute in tiny amounts you never notice. Standing is not a state. Standing is a verb. It is a constant, quiet negotiation between gravity pulling you down and 1,000 little muscular corrections holding you up. And the whole conversation runs below your awareness, handled by machinery in your inner ear, in the soles of your feet, in the stretch senses buried inside every muscle. When you are young, that machinery is fast and it is generous and it never sends you the bill. As the years go by, it slows. The signals take a hair longer to arrive. The corrections come a beat late. And a correction that comes a beat late is the difference between a wobble you laugh off and a fall you do not get up from. So what those slow floating movements were secretly training all along was not the muscles so much as the conversation. Every time one of those older people shifted their weight from one leg to the other, deliberately, slowly, with control, they were rehearsing the exact thing that fails in a fall. They were teaching the body to know precisely where it is in space. They were practicing standing on the edge of their own stability and coming back from it on purpose 100 times an afternoon, so that when the real edge came, the curb, the wet tile, the rug, the body had been there before and knew the way home. And the researchers did not just count falls. They measured the machinery directly, and this is where you can watch the improvement with your own eyes. They used a simple test where you rise from a chair, walk a short way, turn around, come back, and sit down, and they timed the whole thing with a stopwatch. The Tai Chi people did it faster, by about 7/10 of a second. That does not sound like much until you remember that a fall is decided in less time than that. They measured how far a person could lean forward, reaching out with an arm, before they had to step to keep from toppling. The Tai Chi group could reach almost 3 centimeters farther out over their own toes and still come back, which is to say their island of safety had gotten wider. And they measured how long a person could stand on a single leg, just balance on one foot, and the Tai Chi group held it nearly 10 seconds longer. 10 seconds. On one leg. In your 70s and 80s. That is not a small thing. That is the exact reserve you draw on when the other foot is caught and you have half a heartbeat to survive on the leg that is still under you. Now I want to be honest with you, the way a good investigation demands, because it would be easy to hear all this and decide that Tai Chi is magic, and it is not magic. It is mechanism. The people who gathered up all these studies, dozens of them, thousands of participants, found the same shape every time. This practice cuts the risk of falling by something like a quarter across the board, and they found something you would expect once you understand what is really happening. The more you do it, the better it works. 3 times a week beats once a week. And it kept paying off as the total hours piled up on and on, all the way to something like 144 hours of practice before the benefit finally leveled off, which is just another way of saying what we already learned from the muscle and from the power. The body does not care about your good intentions. It responds to the dose. It adapts to exactly what you ask of it, no more, and it asks in return only that you keep asking. So look at what we have now. We have 3 qualities, 3 separate things, and they are not the same thing wearing 3 hats. There is strength, the raw force the muscle can produce, and it fades slowly at first and then faster. There is power, force delivered quickly, the watts, the explosive rise, and it fades sooner and steeper, and it is the better predictor of nearly everything that matters. And now there is this 3rd quality, balance, which is not really about the muscle at all, but about the nervous system that steers the muscle. The timing of the whole apparatus, the speed of the conversation between the falling body and the catching body. And here is the quiet, beautiful thing that ties the room in Portland back to the kitchen chair. You need all 3. Strength without balance is a strong man falling. Balance without power is a graceful man who cannot get his foot down in time. The chair stand, done quick and slow, feeds the first 2. The slow floating weight shift feeds the 3rd. They are not competitors. They are 3 legs of one stool, and a stool, as any carpenter will tell you, does not stand on 2, which raises the obvious next question, the one you are probably already forming, and it is a fair one. If all 3 matter, and if they answer to the dose, then how much exactly? How heavy? How fast? How often? How long before a person actually crosses from the group that is quietly declining into the group that is quietly climbing back? Because so far I have given you the qualities and the reasons, but I have been a little vague about the numbers. And vagueness is precisely the thing we have spent this whole talk refusing to accept from the old idea. So let us get specific. Let us go and find the studies that put a real weight on the bar and a real count on the reps. And let us see just how little it takes, and how much it gives back, and why the fear that this is dangerous for an old body turns out to be almost exactly backwards. Here is what a good study looks like when you finally get down to the weight and the count. 2 sessions in a week, not 7, not even 3, if you are only chasing the strength. 2. In each session you pick an exercise, and you do 2 sets of it, maybe 3, and in each set you do somewhere between 7 and 9 repetitions before your legs have had about enough. And the load, the actual heaviness of the thing you are pushing against, sits up around 3/4 of the most you could possibly move one single time. That last part frightens people, so let me say it slowly. If the very heaviest push you could manage, once with everything you have, is your ceiling, then you want to work at roughly 3/4 of that ceiling. Not a feather, not a token, a real honest resistance that makes the 7th repetition feel earned. And when the careful people gathered up all the trials they could find, the ones that compared this heavier work against a gentler, lighter version, the heavier work won. It built more maximum strength than the middle load and far more than the timid load. The muscle answers the question you ask it. Ask a small question, get a small answer. Ask a real one, and the fiber that had been shrinking quietly since your 50th birthday begins, for the first time in years, to be told it is needed again. Now I promised you this would seem backwards, the danger part, so let me pay that off. You would think, wouldn't you, that handing a person past 70 a heavy resistance and telling them to strain against it is a recipe for a torn something, a pop that, a trip to the very emergency room we have been trying to keep them out of. That is the fear, and the people who study this, who watched carefully across trial after trial, wrote down a sentence I want you to hold on to as you drift off. High-intensity progressive resistance training in the elderly is effective, and substantial adverse effects are not to be expected. Read that twice in the quiet of your own head. The thing everyone treats as reckless turns out to be, in the careful record, remarkably safe. And meanwhile, the thing everyone treats as safe, the endless gentle strolling and nothing more, is quietly letting the fast fiber wither. The caution was pointed in exactly the wrong direction. We were guarding the door while the window stood open. But strength, remember, was never the whole prize. We spent a good long while earlier learning that the quality which fails first and matters most for catching yourself is not strength but power. Force multiplied by speed. And so the truly interesting studies are not the ones that just made old legs stronger. They are the ones that made old legs faster. Same weight on the machine. Same person. The only difference was the instruction. One group was told to push slowly, deliberately, the way we have always imagined proper careful exercise ought to look. The other group was told to push that weight as fast as they safely could, to fire it upward, explosively, and then lower it back down under control. Over 16 weeks, the fast group came out with a gain in power roughly 84% greater than the slow group. Let that number settle. Nearly double the improvement in the very quality that decides whether your foot gets back under you in time. Same effort, same iron, same joints. All that change was intent. The willingness to move quickly on the way up. And the body, which had forgotten how to be quick, remembered. In another trial, 12 weeks long, they measured how fast people could rise from a chair 5 times in a row, up and down and up and down, and the group that trained with speed improved that time about 44% faster than the comparison. 44%. That is the difference between hauling yourself up out of a low couch like it is a project you have scheduled for the afternoon, and simply standing, the way you did at 40, without narrating it to yourself first. And in a third study, again 12 weeks, they had people walk for 6 minutes and measured how far they got. The trained group added about 20 meters to that distance. 20 meters more of the world opened back up in 3 months. And when they looked at the raw power the legs could produce on the leg press, it had climbed by anywhere from 50% to 141%. More than doubled in some of them, in 12 weeks. In bodies that the world had already written off as being on the long slope down. Now I do not want to wave these percentages at you like a man selling something, because a percentage floating free of meaning is just noise, and we agreed at the start we would not do that to each other. So the researchers did something I find genuinely wise. They asked, what is the smallest improvement in leg power that a person can actually feel out in their life? Not feel on a graph, feel on a curb. Feel when the bus is at the stop and the doors are about to close. And the answer they settled on is a rise of about 9 or 10% in leg extending power. That much, and a person notices. Stairs that had become a negotiation become just stairs again. A walk that had a limit finds its limit moved a little further out. Boarding the bus, lifting the foot high enough and fast enough to clear the step before the doors decide the matter becomes possible again. 9 or 10%. That is the threshold where the number turns back into a life. And they set a second, higher mark, a rise of 15 to 18%, and they call that a substantial improvement. The kind that does not just nudge you, but genuinely resets what you can do. So now look back at those trials. A group that gained 84% more power than the slow group. Legs that added 50, 100, 140% on the press. We are not talking about creeping up to the 9% that a person can feel. We are talking about clearing it many times over. The gap between the decline you were told to accept and the recovery you were never told was possible is not narrow. It is enormous. It has been sitting there in the record, unclaimed, this whole time. I want to pause on why the speed matters so much, because it is easy to hear all this and think, well, fast or slow, work is work. Surely the muscle cannot tell the difference. But it can. Remember the fiber we met? The fast one, the type 2, the one that shrank by nearly a third and that walking never bothered to call upon. That fiber exists for exactly one purpose. Speed. Sudden, brief, forceful speed. It is the sprinter of your body, and like a sprinter it does not show up for a slow walk in the park. When you push a weight slowly, even a heavy one, you can get much of the way through the motion leaning on the patient, tireless, slow fibers. But when you demand speed, when you ask the leg to fire, the slow fibers simply cannot answer fast enough, and the body has no choice. It must reach for the fast ones. It must wake the sprinter. And a sprinter that is woken and used and asked again tomorrow does what living tissue always does when it is genuinely needed. It grows. Not in number. We learned that. You do not grow new fibers. But the ones you have thicken and fill out, and the 24% of size that had drained out of them over the decades comes flooding back because someone finally asked. That is the quiet mechanical secret hiding underneath all these trials. Slow training talks mostly to the fibers that were never the problem. Fast training, explosive training, power training calls directly on the exact fibers that aged, the exact ones that failed, the exact ones that decide whether you catch yourself on the rug or go down. It is as though we spent decades shouting encouragement at the one part of the engine that was working fine, while the part that had seized up sat there in the dark, waiting for the one instruction we never gave it. Move quickly. And here is the part that ought to make you smile as you lie there. This does not require a laboratory. It does not require the machine they used in the study, or a young man in a white coat measuring watts. The principle is the thing, and the principle travels. Any resistance your leg must overcome, met with the honest intent to move quickly on the way up and with control on the way down, is speaking the language the fast fiber understands. The chair you sit in, your own body weight, the step at your front door. We are going to come to exactly how, and it will be humbler than you expect, and that humility is the whole point, because a thing you can actually do every morning beats a perfect thing you will never begin. But before we get to the doing, I want to take you inside the single most ordinary motion of your entire day, the one you have performed perhaps 10,000 times without once watching it, and I want us to watch it, slowly, frame by frame, the way you would slow down a film to see the wing beat of a bird. Because standing up out of a chair, which sounds like nothing, which sounds like the least worthy subject for a serious talk, is in fact a small marvel of timing and force and falling and catching, and once you truly see what your legs are doing in those 2 seconds, you will understand, better than any study can tell you, precisely what has been slipping away and precisely what we are trying to give back. Sit down for a moment, if you are not already, and let yourself be honest about the fact that you are sitting. Feel the chair holding you up. Feel how little you are doing. Gravity has you, the seat has caught you, and every muscle in your legs has quietly clocked out and gone home. That is the starting position, and it is a position of total surrender. Now I am going to ask you to defeat gravity, to lift the entire weight of your body up and over your own feet and hold it there, balanced on 2 small platforms, and I am going to ask you to do it in about 2 seconds. That is standing up. That is the thing you call nothing. Watch the first thing that happens. It is not your legs, it is your nose. You lean forward. Before a single knee straightens, your head and your chest and your shoulders tip out over your knees, and this is not clumsiness. This is genius. This is the oldest trick your body knows. When you lean forward, you are borrowing. You are taking the weight that was sitting straight down on the chair and you are throwing it forward and slightly down, and in doing that, you create a little swing, a little pendulum of momentum, so that when your legs finally do fire, they do not have to lift a dead weight from a standstill. They get to catch a body that is already moving. The scientists who study this call that first part the flexion momentum phase, which is a heavy set of words for a light little bow. A small forward nod that says to the floor, "Here I come." And here is the quiet thing I want you to notice. This bow, this leaning, is the cheapest part. It costs almost nothing. It is coordination, it is timing, it is a habit older than memory. It is not power. So this is the part that survives. This is the part that stays with you long after the expensive parts have started to fade. Then comes the instant that decides everything. Your backside leaves the seat. For one moment, and it truly is only a moment, you are no longer sitting and you are not yet standing. You are nowhere. You are a body in the air with nothing under it but 2 bent legs and 2 feet planted flat on the ground. And every bit of you is now leaning forward over those feet. And if nothing else happens, you will simply keep falling in the direction your nose pointed you. This is the handoff. The books call it the momentum transfer phase. The moment from liftoff until your ankles bend as far forward as they will go, and I want you to sit with how naked that moment is. All that borrowed swing from the little bow, all that forward motion, it now has to be caught and turned. It has to be redirected from going forward to going up. And the thing that catches it, the thing that turns a fall into a rise, is your legs firing hard and firing fast. Not slow, fast. In that half breath of transfer, the muscles across the front of your thigh and the deep muscles of your hip and the muscles of your calf all have to snap on together. In the right order, in the right fraction of a second, or the whole thing sags and you drop back down onto the seat and try again with a bigger lean. And now the last part, the climb, the extension phase, where your hips open and your knees straighten and your trunk comes upright, all at once against the full weight of gravity pulling you back down. This is the part that looks like the whole job to a person watching. It is not. It is only the finish. But it is the finish that asks for the most. Because now you are lifting, genuinely lifting, hoisting the mass of your torso and your head and your arms straight up along a line that gravity fights every centimeter of the way. And what does the lifting? The big, fast muscles of the thigh and the hip, the very fibers we spoke of, the type 2 fibers, the fast twitch ones, the ones that shrank by nearly a third between the young thigh and the old one, the ones the morning walk never asked to work. This explosive climb, this final upward snap, is exactly the motion that lives or dies on those fibers. The endurance fibers, the slow, patient ones, cannot do it. They are the wrong tool. You cannot climb out of a chair on patience. You climb out of it on a brief, bright burst of force, and burst is a type 2 word. So here is what I find so beautiful and so quietly sad about watching an older body do this simple thing. The person adapts. The person is not foolish. The body is not foolish. It notices that the burst has gotten weaker, that the fast climb does not fire the way it used to, and it compensates cleverly without ever being told to. How? It leans further. If the engine that lifts you up has lost some of its snap, then you must arrive at the liftoff moment with more speed already banked. So you bow deeper, you throw your chest further out over your knees, you build a bigger swing to hand off. That is why, if you watch carefully, an older person very often rocks, tips well forward, sometimes gives a little preliminary bounce before rising. It is not weakness of will. It is intelligence. It is a body routing around a failing part, spending cheap momentum to cover for expensive power it no longer has in full. And it works, right up until the day it does not, until the lean is not quite enough, or the floor is a little slick, or the catch comes a beat too late, and then the same forward lean that saved 1,000 stands becomes the very thing that pitches you past your own feet. There is more hiding in that motion, and it is down at the ankle, which almost nobody thinks about. When you are in that airborne handoff, leaning forward, your shins are tipping forward over your feet, your ankles bending, and the muscles of your lower leg have to control that, have to meter it out, have to hold the shin at just the right angle so your weight stacks over the middle of your foot and not off the front of it. In the older leg, the torque at that ankle, the twisting force it can produce as the foot bends forward, comes up short. The ankle cannot push and steady the way it once did, and something else creeps in, something that sounds like it should help but hurts. The muscles on both sides of the joint start switching on at the same time, the one that bends and the one that straightens, firing together, tensing against each other at the ankle and at the knee. Scientists call that coactivation, and in a young steady body there is very little of it during a smooth stand. But an uncertain body braces. It stiffens. It clenches both sides of the joint at once, the way you grip a railing on ice, and while that bracing feels like safety, it is enormously wasteful. Two muscles pulling against each other cancel each other out. You spend force to fight your own force. The net push that actually lifts you shrinks, and the whole motion slows down, and the slowing is measurable. The stand takes longer, second by second, year by year. Put all of that together and look at what we have. A motion in 3x, a cheap forward bow that costs nothing and lasts a lifetime, a naked instant of handoff that depends entirely on a fast burst of force, a hard upward climb powered by exactly the fibers that age steals first, and a body so clever it hides its own decline by leaning harder and bracing tighter, spending momentum and stiffness to paper over the missing power until the compensations run out. Now tell me, Where in the morning walk, in that lovely, slow, level rhythmic stroll around the block, did you ever once ask your legs to produce a fast burst of force, to catch a falling body and turn it upward in half a second, to fire the type 2 fibers all together in a bright explosive snap? You did not. Not once. The walk trained the bow. The walk trained the patience. The walk never went anywhere near the part that actually stands you up. And that is why a person can walk faithfully for years and still, one ordinary afternoon, find the chair suddenly a little harder to escape and feel a small cold puzzlement. Because they did everything right, they stayed active, and no one ever told them that active and powerful are two different words. This is the whole argument arriving at its flaw. Not because staying active is wrong. It is not wrong, it is good. It is genuinely good for your heart and your mood and 100 other things. But it is aimed at the wrong muscle quality for this particular trouble. The chair does not test your endurance. The rug that catches your toe does not test your endurance. The curb, the bus step, the sudden stumble on the stairs, none of them care how far you can walk. They ask one question, and they ask it fast. Can you produce enough force right now in a fraction of a second to save yourself? And the honest answer for a great many faithful walkers is quietly slipping toward no. So having seen the machine so plainly, having watched it stand and lean and brace and slow, we are finally ready to ask the only question that matters. If the walk cannot give this back, what can? And the answer, it turns out, has been sitting under you this entire time, wearing the disguise of an ordinary kitchen chair. Let me tell you about an experiment, because this is where the story turns from complaint into remedy. Somebody took a group of older people and split them in two. Both groups lifted the very same weight. Both groups did the very same movement. The only difference between them was speed. One group lifted slowly, the way you might expect an older person ought to lift, careful and deliberate, easing the load up as if it were made of glass. The other group lifted that identical weight fast, or as fast as they safely could, punching the effort into the first part of the motion and then coming back down under control. 16 weeks later, they measured what had changed, and the fast group, the ones who had asked their muscles to hurry, had built something like 84% more power than the slow group. Same weight, same reps, same weeks. The whole difference lived in the intent to move quickly. Now sit with that, because it is a little bit shocking when you first meet it. For years, the gentle advice to an aging body was, do it slowly, do it carefully, do not rush. And that advice protects you from hurting yourself, which matters. I do not wave that away. But when it comes to rebuilding the exact quality you are losing fastest, the slowness was quietly throwing away most of the benefit. The muscle learns what you ask of it. Ask it to be slow, and it gets a little better at being slow. Ask it to be quick, even against a modest load, and it starts rebuilding the machinery of quickness, the very machinery that catches you when your toe snags the rug. There is another one of these studies I love, because it measured something you can feel in your own kitchen. They took older people and over 12 weeks had them train with speed, and then they timed how long it took to rise from a chair 5 times in a row. 5 stands, up and down, as fast as safe. The trained group cut that time down 44% faster than the ordinary slow training comparison. Think about what that means in a life. That is the difference between rising from the dinner table like it is nothing and bracing both hands on the arms and rocking twice to get the momentum. And in yet another one, 12 weeks of this kind of work, people added about 20 meters to how far they could walk in 6 minutes, and their leg press power climbed somewhere between 50 and 141%. Not 50% for everyone, but the range tells you something honest. Some bodies had so much room to recover that they nearly doubled, and then some. Here is the part that keeps it from being a fairy tale. The researchers did the careful, unglamorous work of asking how much improvement actually matters to a person's day, because you can move a number on a machine and change nothing about someone's life. So they defined a threshold. The smallest gain in leg power that a person can genuinely feel in the world turns out to be about a 9 or 10% increase, which comes to roughly 18 to 23 watts depending on the load. That is the door opening. Below that, the change hides inside the noise of ordinary days. At or above it, the stair feels a touch easier, The walk to the corner stretches a little longer before tiredness. The bus step stops being a small negotiation. And if you want not just to feel it, but to feel it clearly, to cross into what they called a substantial improvement, you are looking at something like 15 to 18%. Those are not enormous numbers. That is the mercy hiding in all of this. The body that has been declining 3 or 4% a year does not need a miracle. It needs to claw back a season or two of loss and hold it. Before we talk about how, I want to take you all the way inside one single ordinary act and look at it the way you would look at a machine you had never seen before. Standing up out of a chair. You have done it what? 10,000 times, 100,000 times, and never once watched it happen. So let us watch. It comes in 3 parts, and they flow together so smoothly that you feel them as one, but they are not one. The first part is the lean. You tip your trunk forward, and it feels like nothing, like getting ready. But you are actually doing something clever with physics. You are throwing your upper body forward to build momentum, borrowing motion, gathering a little running start while your backside is still on the seat. Call it the flexion phase, the leaning in. The second part is the handoff, and this is the delicate one. Right at the instant your weight comes off the chair, your body has to catch the forward momentum you built and redirect it upward. Your backside lifts and your shins tip forward over your feet until your ankles are bent as far as they will go, the front of the shin pulling toward the top of the foot. That bend at the ankle, that reach of the shin over the foot, has a name, dorsiflexion, and hold on to it, because it is going to matter more than you would ever guess. In this middle phase, you are the least stable you will be. You have left the safety of the seat, and you have not yet stacked your bones into a standing tower. You are, for a heartbeat, a controlled fall going the wrong direction, upward. The third part is the push, the extension. Hip, knee, and trunk all straighten together against gravity, and gravity is not gentle. Gravity is pulling the whole mass of you back down into the chair the entire time. This is the part that needs power. Not endurance, not the patient slow burn of a long walk. It needs a quick, coordinated shove, delivered in a small window of time, or else you sink back down and try again. Now here is what happens to that beautiful 3-part machine as the fast twitch fibers thin and the power drains away. The body is clever, and it compensates, and the compensation is the tell. Watch an older person who has lost leg power rise from a low chair, and you will see them lean much further forward than they used to, sometimes so far the nose travels out past the knees. Why? Because if the push is weak, you need more borrowed momentum from the lean to make up for it. They are trading strength they no longer have for motion they can still scrounge. And down at the ankle, the story gets quieter and sadder. The torque that bends the shin over the foot is weaker, and the muscles start fighting themselves. In a young, sure body, when one muscle contracts to move a joint, its opposite relaxes and gets out of the way. In the aging, less confident body, the opposite muscle tenses up at the same time, bracing, co-contracting, as if the nervous system no longer trusts the joint to move without a spotter. It is the body's own caution written into the muscle, and it makes everything slower, stiffer, more effortful. The whole rise takes longer, and the phase that suffers the most, the phase that fast twitch loss strikes right at the heart of, is that third one, the explosive push, the one that was never about endurance in the first place. So do you see what has happened to us over these last hours together? We started with the comfortable belief that a good long daily walk was the whole answer, and one careful look at a time, the belief has come apart in our hands. The walk does not restore fast twitch fiber size. The walk does not rebuild power, and now we see the walk does not even touch the specific 3-part ankle and hip choreography of getting up off a chair, which is the very motion most likely to betray you. But here is the turn, and it is a kind turn, because everything we have learned points, all of it, at a remedy that costs nothing and lives in your own home. That same kitchen chair, the one we used to test you. We are going to use it to rebuild you, and we are going to use it differently. Not standing up slowly and carefully, standing up with intent, with a little quickness in the push, as fast as you can manage while staying perfectly safe, and then lowering yourself back down slow and controlled, because the slow lowering trains the muscle too, in its own way. Up quick, down slow. That single change, the quickness on the way up, is you reaching directly for the power quality, the watts, the thing the slow walk could never give. The test becomes the training. The chair that measured your trouble becomes the chair that mends it. And you do not have to guess whether it is working, because you already have the yardstick. 30 seconds, count the stands. You know roughly where a healthy body your age lands, somewhere around 12 or 13 for many people in their late 60s, a little fewer as the years climb. So you have a number today, and you will have a number in 6 weeks, and the chair will tell you the truth without flattery and without cruelty. It just counts. But the chair alone is not the whole prescription, and I would be misleading you if I let you think it was. Because remember that ankle? Remember the shin that must bend over the foot in the handoff phase? Remember the dorsiflexion torque that was fading? The chair rise leans on it but does not fully build it. And remember too that catching a stumble is not only about pushing up, it is about staying balanced while everything is moving. So the real medicine, the thing the studies keep pointing to, is not one exercise at all. It is a small braid of them working together, and when we pick that braid apart strand by strand, you are going to find that each strand answers one of the exact failures we uncovered tonight. Let us take the first strand and hold it up to the light. It is the ankle, and it is the humblest muscle you own. The calf, that fleshy back of the lower leg that you never think about, that does its work in silence every time you take a step. And here is the lovely thing about it. There was a study done with a group of healthy older men, average age around 73, and all they were asked to do was raise up onto the balls of their feet. Heel raises. The simplest movement in the world. You stand, and you push the floor away with the front of your feet, and you rise up like you are reaching for a jar on a high shelf, and then you come back down slow. 3 sets of 10. 3 times a week. 8 weeks. But there was one small instruction that made all the difference, and I want you to hold on to it, because it is the same secret we found hiding inside the chair. They were told on the way up to do it fast as they safely could. Explode up, float down. And after those 8 weeks, what changed? Not the size of the muscle. If you measured the calf, it was about the same. The architecture, the way the fibers were arranged, about the same. But the speed at which the ankle could produce its turning force, the rate at which the torque came on, climbed by about 21%. 21% from nothing more than pushing up onto your toes with intent. Now sit with what that means, because it is one of the most hopeful things I know. The improvement did not come from building new meat. It came from the wiring, from the nervous system relearning how to fire the muscle it already had quickly all at once on command. The body was not weak so much as it had forgotten how to shout, and you taught it to shout again by asking it to 3 times a week for 8 weeks. That is the ankle strand. That is the shin that must bend over the foot. The dorsiflexion torque that was fading, answered directly by the plainest movement a person can do while holding a countertop. Now take the second strand, and this one is about the stiffness that quietly steals your balance. You see, it is not enough for the ankle to be strong and quick. It also has to be free. The joint has to be able to travel, to let the shin roll forward over the foot. Because if it cannot, then when you lean to stand, or when you catch yourself mid-stumble, the motion jams up before it should, and the whole recovery goes stiff and late. There was a study of people aged 65 to 75, and all they did was stretch the ankle. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, for 3 weeks. That is a short season, not even a month. And at the end of it, the range of motion at the ankle had opened up, and their balance scores improved, and the cadence of their walking, the rhythm of their steps got better, and the time they spent with both feet planted on the ground during walking, that hesitant double support shuffle that older legs fall into, that got shorter, which means their walking got more confident, and their speed went up. From stretching. From nothing but patiently coaxing a stiff hinge to open a little wider each day. And in the group that stretched more comprehensively, the sideways steadiness improved too. that lateral stability that keeps you from tipping over sideways when you turn to reach for something. So there is your second strand. Free the joint, and the leg above it finally gets to use all the strength you have been building. The third strand is the meat of the thigh, and here we return to those bands. Those simple elastic bands you can loop around a chair leg or hold under your foot. There was a trial, 90 older adults, average age just under 67, 8 weeks, 3 times a week, 3 sets of 15. Some of them used the bands the ordinary way, pushing and pulling against the stretch, and some of them were taught to lean on the lowering part of the movement, the part where you resist gravity on the way down, what we call the eccentric portion, the braking phase. And every single group got stronger in the knee extensors, the big muscles on the front of the thigh, and the improvement was real and statistically solid. The group that emphasized the braking, the slow controlled lowering, actually gained the most in muscle thickness, close to 9% thicker. The band group, a bit less, around 4%. But here is the part I love. When they tested those people 3 months later on a simple task, standing up from a chair, walking a few steps, turning around and sitting back down, the timed up and go test, they had shaved about 1/3 of a second off it. That does not sound like much until you remember that 1/3 of a second is exactly the width of the moment when a foot catches on a rug. That 1/3 of a second is the whole ball game. And their calf flexibility improved too, in every group. So the bands answer the thigh, the knee extensors, the very muscles whose type 2 fibers had shrunk by nearly 1/3, the muscles that drive the explosive extension phase of standing up. You cannot ask a walk to rebuild them. But you can ask a band to. So now look at what we have laid out on the table. A chair, taught to be explosive for the power of standing. Heel raises, done fast, for the speed of the ankle. Stretching, patient and daily, for the freedom of the joint. Bands, with attention to the braking, for the strength of the thigh. 4 strands, and each one, notice, reaches directly into one of the failures we spent the whole evening uncovering. Nothing here is generic. Nothing here is just move more and hope. Each strand is a targeted repair for a specific breakdown, and that specificity is the entire point, the thing the walking never had. But I have been holding back the most important strand of all, and I have held it back on purpose, because it is the one that ties the others together, and because it is the one that fixes the failure that frightens me most. Strength you can rebuild. Power you can reawaken. Range of motion you can stretch back open. But none of that by itself keeps you upright in the half second when the world tilts. Catching a stumble is not a strength problem, and it is not even purely a power problem. It is a coordination problem. It is your body, in the dark, without time to think, sensing that your center of mass has drifted past your feet, and firing the exact right muscles in the exact right order to haul it back. That is balance. And balance, it turns out, is trainable too, but only if you train it on purpose. Here is the evidence that convinced me. When people gathered up all the careful trials and looked at which kind of exercise actually cut the risk of falling, the winner was not any single thing. It was the braid. It was programs that combined resistance training and core training and balance training, all three woven together. That combination produced an effect on fall prevention so large it almost looks like a misprint, a standardized effect of over 3, where anything above 8/10 is considered strong. 3 strands together did what no single strand could do alone, and there was a second lesson buried in those numbers, and it is a lesson about patience, which is fitting for a talk meant to carry you towards sleep. The programs that ran longer than 32 weeks, more than 5 times a week, produced an effect on fall risk of nearly 3. The programs that ran less than 12 weeks produced an effect of under 7/10, more than 4 times weaker. Same exercises, different only in how long the people kept at it. So the medicine is not merely what you do. It is that you keep doing it, past the point where it feels novel, into the season where it becomes simply what you do, the way brushing your teeth is simply what you do. And that word, balance, that idea of the body catching itself without being told, points us towards something I find genuinely beautiful, because it was not invented in a laboratory at all. It was invented centuries ago, on the other side of the world by people who knew nothing of type 2 fibers or watts of leg power or standardized effect sizes, and who nonetheless stumbled onto a practice that does almost everything we have been describing all at once, slowly, gently, in a way that looks from the outside like nothing more than a very patient dance. They were not trying to prevent falls. They were, in some sense, trying to move the way water moves. And it took modern science, with its stopwatches and its control groups, a very long time to catch up and admit that these slow-flowing movements were doing something real, something measurable, something that the fast machines in the gym could not quite match on their own. So let us go there next, to a study hall in Portland, Oregon, where 256 older people were split into two groups, and half of them were taught this ancient flowing art, and the other half were given ordinary gentle stretching, and everyone waited to see what 6 months would reveal. Picture the room. It is nothing special. A study hall with a wooden floor, some folding chairs stacked against the wall, big windows letting in that gray Oregon light. And into this room, over 6 months, 3 times a week, come people between 70 and 92 years old. Half of them are learning to move in a way that must have felt very strange at first. Slowly, deliberately, shifting their weight from one foot to the other like they are pouring something invisible from one cup into another. The teacher tells them to imagine they are moving through water, to keep their knees soft, to turn from the waist, to let one foot become light while the other becomes heavy, and then to trade, gently, without ever quite stopping. This is Yang-style Tai Chi, though to the people in the room it is just a slow and patient dance they are learning together. And the other half of the room, in a sense, are the honest comparison. They are not idle. They are stretching. Ordinary gentle stretching, the kind a doctor might recommend, the kind that feels good and does no harm. Nobody is being lazy here. Both groups are showing up. Both groups are moving. So if the slow dance does something the stretching does not, we cannot chalk it up to one group simply being more active than the other. That is the whole trick of a good experiment. You make the two groups as alike as you possibly can, and then you change one single thing and you wait, and you watch what nature decides to show you. So what did nature decide to show them after 6 months of this? At the end of the study, they counted the falls, not falls in a laboratory, real falls in real kitchens and gardens and stairwells, the falls that these people actually took while living their lives. And the people who had been doing the slow dance had fallen far less. To put a number on it, the risk of falling more than once, the risk of being a repeat faller, was cut by about 55% in the Tai Chi group compared to the stretching group. Better than half. Just from moving slowly 3 times a week for half a year. Let me give you the plainer picture, because the plain picture is the one that stays with you. By the 6-month mark, among the people doing the slow dance, about 28 of every 100 had fallen at all. Among the people doing gentle stretching, it was about 46 of every 100. And the injuries, the falls bad enough to hurt you, the ones that leave a bruise or a break or a fear you carry around for months afterward, those split even more sharply. Roughly 7 of every 100 in the dancing group. Roughly 18 of every 100 in the stretching group. So not only were the dancers falling less often, but when the whole tally was done, they were getting hurt something like a third as much. Now sit with that for a moment, because it should bother you a little, in a good way. Stretching is gentle. Stretching feels responsible. Stretching is what a careful, sensible person does, and it simply did not protect these people the way the slow dance did. Why on earth not? What is hiding inside this patient, water-like movement that a good honest stretch does not contain? Here is where I want to slow down myself, because the answer ties back to everything we have been building all night. When you move slowly, on purpose, shifting your weight from foot to foot, you are doing something that stretching never asks of you. You are standing on one leg. Briefly, again and again, you are asking a single leg to hold up the whole apparatus of you while the other foot floats and searches for its next place to land. That is balance. But it is not balance the way we usually mean it, the way of standing still like a statue. It is balance in motion, balance handed back and forth, The exact kind your body has to perform every time you take a step across a room. Every step you take is, secretly, a controlled fall caught by one leg. The slow dance rehearses that catch over and over at a speed where you have time to learn it, and where a mistake means only that you set your foot down early, not that you crack a hip on the tile. And there is more folded inside it than balance. When you sink down into those soft bent knees and hold yourself there, and then rise and shift and sink again, you are asking your thigh muscles to work quietly and continuously against gravity. Not with a heavy weight, not fast, but steadily and through a range of motion your ankles and knees do not usually get to travel. Remember what we said about the ankle, about how the older ankle loses some of its ability to bend forward, to dorsiflex, and how that stiffness shows up in a shuffling, uncertain gait. This slow dance keeps asking the ankle to bend, to load, to feel where the ground is. It keeps the conversation going between the foot and the floor. When the researchers pooled together many of these Tai Chi studies later on, gathering up something like 24 separate trials and more than 5,000 participants, the numbers held. Across all of them, the slow dance reduced the risk of falling by about 24%. And they could measure why in the small mechanical tests we have already met tonight. Remember the test where you rise from a chair, walk a short distance, turn and sit back down, and someone times the whole errand? The dancers got faster at it, by a little under 7/10 of a second on average. That does not sound like much until you remember that this errand is a stand-in for every real errand, every trip, to answer a knock at the door before the visitor gives up and leaves. They could reach farther forward without toppling, by nearly 3 centimeters more than before. And when they stood on one leg and someone counted how long they could hold it, they held it longer by something on the order of 9 or 10 seconds. 9 extra seconds of standing on one foot may be the difference between catching yourself and not. On the morning, your slipper snags the edge of a rug. And there was a pattern in the pattern which I always love, because it tells you the effect is real and not a fluke. The more they danced, the more they gained. People who practiced 3 or more times a week did better than people who practiced less. And the benefit kept accumulating as the total hours piled up, all the way to something like 144 hours of practice before the curve seemed to level off. That is the fingerprint of a genuine cause. If a little helps a little, and more helps more, in an orderly way you are usually looking at something true, not something imagined. Now I do not want you to walk away thinking the slow dance is magic, or that it replaces everything else we have talked about. It does not. Go back to those fast machines in the gym, to the high-velocity chair rises, to the whole business of training power, of teaching the muscle to fire quickly. The slow dance does not train that quickness. You cannot become explosive by moving like honey. So what we are really seeing is 2 different medicines for 2 different parts of the same problem. The power training rebuilds the fast type 2 fibers, the ones that vanish quietly after your 50th birthday, the ones that fire when your foot catches and you have half a second to save yourself. The slow dance trains the other half of the miracle, the balance, the weight shifting, the patient conversation between foot and floor, the standing on one leg that every single step secretly requires. One gives you the engine, the other teaches you to steer. And a person who has both, the quick catch and the steady steer, is a person who is genuinely hard to knock down. There is something almost humbling in this if you let yourself feel it. Here were people, centuries ago on the other side of the world, who had never heard the word sarcopenia, who had never seen a muscle fiber under a microscope, who could not have told you a watt from a widget, and by paying close attention to their own bodies, by asking what it feels like to move the way water moves, to stay soft and rooted and balanced and slow, they built a practice that lands, blow for blow, on nearly every weakness we have spent this whole evening diagnosing with our machines and our statistics. They found the medicine without the theory. And then, thousands of years later, a group of scientists in a grey-lit hall in Portland took out their stopwatches and their clipboards and confirmed, with all the careful machinery of a controlled trial, that the old dancers had been right the whole time. That is not a small thing. That is one of the loveliest kinds of moment in all of science. The moment when careful measurement bows its head to something ancient and says, yes, you knew. You knew before we could prove it. So we have gathered quite a collection of tools now. We have the chair, used the fast way, to rebuild power. We have the heel raises done as quickly as you safely can to wake up the ankle and the calf. We have the slow dance to teach balance and to keep the foot in honest conversation with the floor. And we are beginning to see that the answer to weak legs is not one thing at all. It is not just walk more. It is not just lift. It is not just balance. It is a small, sensible braid of several things, each one aimed at a different part of the machine, each one grounded in something a real study actually measured. Let us take these threads now and start to weave them together, carefully, into something a person could actually do. Tomorrow morning, in an ordinary room, with nothing more than a chair and a bit of floor and a few honest minutes. So let us begin the weaving, and let us do it the way a careful cook builds a stew, not by throwing everything in at once, but by understanding what each ingredient is for. Think of your morning as having 4 small jobs, and each job speaks to a different weakness we have uncovered in the machine. There is the job of power, which is the fast chair stand. There is the job of the ankle, which is the quick heel raise. There is the job of balance, which is the slow, deliberate dance of shifting weight. And there is the job of the walk itself, which is the one thing the conventional wisdom got partly right, kept now not as the whole answer, but as one honest strand among several. 4 small jobs. None of them takes very long. And the wonderful thing, the thing that ought to make you a little cheerful even as you drift off, is that the studies keep telling us the same story. It is not the person who does one thing furiously who wins. It is the person who does several sensible things, gently, over and over, for a long stretch of time. Let me linger on that phrase, a long stretch of time, because it is where the real magic hides and it is easy to miss. Remember the number I gave you earlier, the one about integrated training, the programs that braided resistance and core and balance together. When the researchers looked at how long people kept it up, they found something that ought to be written on every refrigerator. Programs that ran longer than 32 weeks produced an effect on fall risk of about 2.92 in their standardized way of measuring. And programs that ran shorter than 12 weeks produced an effect of only about 0.68. Now I want you to feel the size of that gap. It is not a small difference. It is the difference between a whisper and a shout. The very same exercises, the very same movements, done for a season versus done for a fortnight, and the payoff multiplies more than 4-fold. So the lesson is almost embarrassingly plain. The exercises matter, yes, but the calendar matters more than any single morning. You cannot cram this. You cannot do a heroic week and bank it. The body forgets. The body always wants to know, what have you asked of me lately, this week, this month? And so the whole architecture of what we are building must be arranged not for intensity, but for the possibility of tomorrow and the tomorrow after that. That changes how you should think about the difficulty. A great many people, when they hear the words strength training, picture a red face and a groan and a bar loaded with iron, and they think, well, that is not for me, I am past that. And I understand the picture. But look again at what the evidence actually asked people to do. Remember Quocco and the others, the ones who found that fast leg press power at only 40% of a person's 1 repetition maximum, which is to say a light load, a load less than half of the most you could push once, that this light and quick effort explained 59% of the variability in how fast people naturally walked. 59% from a movement that is light. The load was not the secret. The speed of the intention was the secret. And that is a gift for an aging body, because a light load moved with quick intent is far kinder to the joints, far kinder to the heart, far less frightening than heaving something enormous. You are not trying to become a strong man. You are trying to remind the fast fibers that they still have a job. So picture the fast chair stand again. But now let me slow down and describe it the way I would describe a delicate instrument. Because the intention inside it is everything. You sit toward the front of a sturdy chair, feet flat, planted a little behind your knees so the shins tilt back toward you. You lean your chest forward, and here is the first phase we spoke of, the flexion momentum, the gathering of a little forward lean like a wave pulling back before it breaks. Then, and this is the part the conventional advice never mentions, you stand up fast. Not recklessly, not in a way that alarms you, but with genuine quickness, as though you had just remembered the kettle was boiling. Up you come, hips and knees and trunk unfolding together against gravity. That is the extension phase, and that is the explosive phase, and that is precisely the phase the shrunken fast fibers have been quietly abandoning. Then you sit down slowly. Slowly, because lowering yourself under control is its own kind of training. The eccentric kind, the kind one of our studies tied to real gains in the thickness of the muscle. Fast up, slow down. Fast up, slow down. You are training two qualities in a single humble motion, and you are doing it with a chair that costs you nothing. Now how many? This is where the chair test becomes not just a mirror, but a coach. Recall the ordinary range for a person in their late 60s. Somewhere around a dozen to 16 or 18 good stands in 30 seconds. A little lower as the years climb into the 70s. You do not need to hit the top of the range on your first day. You need to find your honest number, the one you measured with a clock, and then you need to nudge it. A little more this month than last month. That nudging, that patient upward pressure is the whole game. And if standing up unaided is too much at the start, you rest your hands lightly on the chair arms and let them help only as much as they must, and then, week by week, you ask your hands to help a little less. The body is generous when you negotiate with it slowly. It is stubborn only when you demand everything at once. Then the ankles. We spent a good while on the ankle, on that quiet joint that governs whether your foot clears the rug or catches on it, and the evidence there was lovely in its simplicity. Remember the men, average age 73, who did nothing but heel raises at home, 3 sets of 10, 3 times a week, for 8 weeks, lifting fast on the way up. Their peak rate of turning on the calf, the speed with which the ankle could produce its force, improved by about 21%. And here is the detail I find quietly astonishing. The muscle did not get bigger. Its architecture did not measurably change. The improvement was not in the meat at all. It was in the wiring, in the nervous system relearning how to fire the muscle quickly. The command line got faster even though the muscle stayed the same size. That tells you the aging body is not a rusted shut door. It is more like an instrument that has drifted out of tune, and tuning is a gentler thing than rebuilding. So you stand behind that same chair, resting your fingertips on its back for balance, not for lifting, and you rise onto the balls of both feet, quickly, and you lower slowly, the same rhythm as the chair stand, fast up and slow down, and you feel the calf gather and release. And when that grows easy, you do it on one foot at a time, which asks far more of the ankle and far more of the little balancing muscles all around it. You are teaching the ankle to be quick again. And quickness in the ankle is very often the thin margin between a stumble that you catch and a stumble that catches you. And around all of this, threaded through it like the slow bass line under a melody, is the balance work, the deliberate shifting of weight from foot to foot, the standing on one leg by the counter while the kettle heats, the slow, soft dance we drew out of that Portland study where the people who practiced it cut their risk of falling again and again by more than half. Balance is not a muscle. Balance is a conversation, a constant negotiation between the sole of your foot and your inner ear and your eyes, and the muscles that make 10 tiny corrections a second without ever telling you they did. And that conversation, like any conversation, grows rusty when it is not held. So you hold it. Every day for a little while you stand somewhere safe and you let yourself wobble on purpose, because the wobble is the lesson. The wobble is the body discovering the edge of its stability and learning, quietly, where the fences are. 4 strands then: power from the fast chair stand, quickness from the heel raise, steadiness from the balance work, and the honest, rhythmic walk kept in its rightful place. No longer asked to carry the whole load it was never built to carry, but valued for what it truly gives, which is the health of the heart and the lungs and the slow endurance of the long, slow fibers. You braid them together not because some authority commanded it, but because we watched section by section as each strand answered a different failure we found in the machine. And when you set them side by side and asked which arrangement the evidence favored most, the answer came back the same every time. It was the braid. It was the integrated thing, the resistance and the core and the balance woven into one practice, that scored highest of all, far higher than any single strand pulled out and done alone. So now, having gathered our threads and understood what each is for, let us ask the harder and more human question, the one that decides whether any of this ever leaves the page and enters a life. Not what should a person do. We know a great deal about what a person should do. The question is how a person actually keeps doing it, morning after ordinary morning, when no one is watching, and the results creep in so slowly that on any single day you cannot see them at all. Think for a moment about how a habit really forms, because it is not the way most people imagine. Most people imagine that willpower is a kind of fuel, and that some fortunate souls are simply born with a bigger tank. But watch a person who brushes their teeth every night. They do not summon willpower for it. They do not stand in the bathroom weighing the costs and benefits. The thing has fused itself to a moment, to a cue, to the click of the light switch and the sight of the sink, and the action follows the cue the way a shadow follows a hand. So if you want the legwork to survive past the first eager fortnight, you do not lean on resolve, which is a candle that burns down fast. You anchor it to something that already happens every single day without fail. You are going to stand up from a chair this morning no matter what. You are always going to, so let the standing up itself become the practice. Tie the new thread to a rope that is already there. And here is a thing worth sitting with quietly. The evidence we walked through was patient about time in a way our impatience is not. Remember what the pooled trials told us. The programs that ran longer than 32 weeks moved the needle on falling by an amount the statisticians wrote as 2.92, while the programs that quit before 12 weeks managed only 0.68. Read those two numbers slowly and let the gap between them speak. It is not that the short programs did the wrong exercises. Very often they did exactly the same exercises. They simply stopped too soon, before the nervous system had finished its slow rewiring, before the fast fibers had been coaxed back toward their old size. The body is not a machine you can service in an afternoon. It is more like a garden. You do not shout at a garden to grow faster. You show up, you tend it, and you accept that the visible change lags weeks behind the invisible one. The root thickens long before the leaf appears. This is precisely why the daily creep of results is so cruel to our motivation, and why we must be clever about it. On any given Tuesday, you will feel no stronger than you did on Monday. The 1 to 2% of muscle you lose in a year does not announce itself on a Tuesday, and neither does the muscle you rebuild. Your senses were never built to detect a change that small over a span that long. So do not trust your senses for this. Trust the chair. Once every few weeks, sit down with the same kitchen chair in the same 30 seconds we spoke of before and count. When a man of 68 who counted 11 honest stands in the spring counts 14 by the middle of summer, that is not a feeling. That is a measurement, and a measurement will tell you the truth on the days your feelings lie. Recall the numbers the German study gave us: more than 1,600 ordinary people from the city of Bremen, the women averaging near 13 stands, and the men a shade above that. You now have a ruler. Use the ruler when the mirror is silent. Let me put a gentle warning beside all this encouragement, because I would be a poor guide if I only sold you the sunshine. There will come a morning, perhaps the 9th or the 10th, when the whole enterprise feels faintly ridiculous. You will be standing and sitting in your kitchen, feeling nothing dramatic, wondering whether a scientist somewhere is playing an elaborate joke. That morning is the entire game. That morning is where the 2.92 and the 0.68 are decided. Everyone can do a hard thing when it is thrilling. The people who keep their legs into their 80s are simply the people who did the unremarkable thing on the unremarkable morning, one more time, and then again. There is no secret hiding behind that. The secret is that there is no secret. Now I want to fold in a piece of the puzzle we have been circling, because it changes the flavor of the whole practice. We have talked about strength, and we have talked at length about power. That quickness, the watts, the force multiplied by the speed of the movement. But there is a third quality braided through all of this that we have only touched, and it is balance, which is not really one thing at all, but a running conversation between your inner ear, your eyes, the little senses buried in your muscles and joints, and the muscles themselves that must answer. correctly and in a fraction of a second before you have consciously understood that anything has gone wrong. When your foot catches the edge of a rug, no committee meets. There is no time for a committee. A signal races up, a signal races down, and your ankle and your hip must fire in the right order with the right force at the right speed, or the floor comes up to meet you. This is why the fast fibers and the power matter so terribly for staying upright. A correction that arrives a quarter second too late is not a correction. It is merely a well-intentioned observation about a fall already in progress. And this brings us at last to a curious and rather beautiful chapter in the story, because it turns out that a practice invented centuries ago in China, long before anyone had biopsied a muscle fiber or measured a watt, had quietly stumbled onto nearly everything we have just deduced from the trials. I am speaking of the slow, flowing movement that people do in parks at dawn, shifting their weight from one foot to the other, turning, reaching, sinking low and rising, all of it unhurried, all of it deliberate. To a busy modern eye, it can look like nothing at all, like very slow dancing done by people in no hurry to arrive anywhere. But look closer with the eyes we have earned in these last hours. What is actually happening when a person stands on one leg, slowly, and controls the descent of their own body weight and turns their trunk while keeping their footing? They are rehearsing, over and over, in perfect safety, the exact emergency that a rug or a curb or a wet tile will one day spring on them without warning. The scientists went and measured this, which is the part I love, because they refused to take the tradition's word for it and instead put it in the ring against the evidence. In the city of Portland, in the state of Oregon, in the year 2005, a group of researchers gathered 256 older adults, ranging in age from 70 all the way to 92, and split them into two camps. One camp learned this old Chinese movement art, meeting 3 times a week for 6 months. The other camp did gentle stretching on the very same schedule, so that the only real difference between the two groups was the nature of the movement itself. Then they simply watched, and they counted, and they waited to see who would fall. The result was not subtle. The people practicing the slow movement art ended up with 55% lower risk of suffering multiple falls than the people who merely stretched. Sit with that fraction for a moment. More than half. By the end of the 6 months, only about 28 of every 100 in the movement group had fallen at all, while in the stretching group it was closer to 46 of every 100. And when a fall did happen, the injuries told the same story. Roughly 7 of every 100 in the movement group suffering an injurious fall against 18 of every 100 among the stretchers. This was not a gentle nudge in the right direction. This was a practice that reached in and rewrote a person's odds of ending up on the floor. When they gathered up many such studies later and looked at them all together, tens of trials and thousands of people, the pattern held its shape. Across the whole pile, this movement art cut the risk of falling by roughly a quarter. And the specifics were exactly what our story predicts. The people who practiced could rise from a chair, walk out, and return faster than before, shaving nearly 7/10 of a second off that little timed errand. They could reach further forward without toppling, gaining a couple of centimeters and a bit more in their controlled reach. And most telling of all, they could stand on a single leg far longer than before, adding on the order of 9 or 10 seconds to the time they could balance on one foot. That last number is the whole thesis of these 3 hours compressed into a single measurement, because standing on one foot is not a party trick. It is the raw ingredient of every step you take, since walking, when you slow it down and truly look, is nothing but a long, confident series of controlled falls onto one leg after another, caught each time before it becomes a real fall. And notice what the researchers found about dose, because it rhymes with everything the strength trials told us. The people who practiced 3 or more times a week did better than those who practiced less. The benefit deepened as the total hours piled up, all the way towards something like 144 hours of accumulated practice before the gains fully ripened. There it is again, that same patient truth we met with the resistance work. The nervous system will give you back the quickness and the balance you ask of it, but it collects its payment in time, and it does not accept a rush check. You cannot cram for this the way a student crams for an examination the night before. The garden does not care about your deadline. Let me stay with that image of the garden a moment longer, because it tells you something about how to think about all of this. When you plant a seed, nothing happens on the surface for a good while. You water it, you wait, you water it again, and the ground just sits there looking like ordinary dirt. And a person who did not understand gardens might conclude the watering does nothing, since there is no green thing poking up to reward the effort. But underneath, out of sight, roots are reaching down and threads are forming, and one morning there is a shoot, and it seems sudden, but it was never sudden. It was accumulating the whole time in a place you could not see. Your legs are exactly like this. The chair stand you do today, done with real intention, done a little quicker than feels comfortable, changes almost nothing you can measure by tomorrow. But it is laying down root. The nervous system is learning to call up more of those fast fibers at once, to fire them in a tighter, more united burst, and that learning is invisible for weeks before it surfaces as a step that does not wobble. So let me now put the whole daily practice together for you, gently, the way you would lay out tools on a bench before you begin a job. And I want to be honest about something first. The exact program does not matter nearly as much as the fact that you do it, and that you do it with the right flavor. We have spent this whole time discovering that the flavor is speed, is power, is the willingness to ask your legs for a quick and honest effort rather than a slow and comfortable one. Hold on to that. Everything else is detail hung on that single hook. Begin with the chair, since you already have one and you already know the movement in your bones. Sit toward the front of the seat, feet flat, planted a little behind your knees so your weight can travel forward over them. Lean, gather the momentum in your trunk the way we said, and then here is the whole secret. Stand up as quickly as you safely can. Not violently, not in a way that makes you dizzy or throws you off, but with intent, with a little snap, treating the standing itself as the exercise rather than a chore to get over with. Then sit back down slowly, and I mean slowly, taking 3 or 4 seconds to lower yourself, resisting gravity the whole way down like you're easing a heavy door shut so it does not slam. That slow lowering is its own kind of gold. When Monjai and the others put older people through 8 weeks of exactly this kind of training, 3 times a week, 3 sets of 15, the group that emphasized the lowering, the lengthening contraction, gained something like 8.7% in the thickness of the muscle itself, while a band group gained about 4%, and both improved their time getting up and walking by around 1/3 of a second by the 3-month mark. So you get 2 gifts from one motion. Fast on the way up trains the power, slow on the way down builds the tissue. One chair, one movement, both halves of the problem. How many? You do not need a laboratory to know. Remember the German study, the 1,657 people in Bremen, where the women averaged nearly 13 stands in 30 seconds and the men just over 13. Remember the American norms, where a 65 to 69-year-old man wants to be north of 12 and a woman north of 11 just to sit in the safe part of the distribution. Those numbers are not only a test, they are a target. You count what you can do today, honestly, and you nudge it upward across the weeks. Not every day at full effort. 2 good sessions a week is where the resistance training evidence keeps landing. 2 sessions, a couple of sets, and enough load or enough speed that the last repetitions feel genuinely like work. The elderly can train hard, harder than most people dare to let them, and the careful reviews keep saying the same reassuring thing, that serious adverse effects are not to be expected when it is done sensibly and built up gradually. Then add the heels, because we found that quiet traitor at the ankle, the plantar flexors losing their quickness, the dorsiflexion going stiff, the whole foot and ankle machine slowing down at precisely the moment a trip demands it be fast. Stand behind the chair, hold the back of it lightly for balance, and rise up onto the balls of your feet, and here is the important part again, rise quickly, as fast as you comfortably can on the way up. That single instruction, up fast, is what Emma and his colleagues gave to a group of healthy older men averaging 73 years, 3 sets of 10, 3 times a week, at home for 8 weeks. And the rate at which those men could develop force at the ankle, the sheer quickness of the push, improved by about 21%. And the beautiful part, the part that should encourage anyone who feels they have no time and no equipment, is that the muscle itself barely changed size at all. The gain was almost entirely in the nervous system learning to fire faster and more completely. You did not grow a new engine. You tuned the one you have. Lower down slowly again, feel the calf lengthen and stretch, and you are quietly working on the flexibility too. The same calf flexibility those band training trials improved across every group. And spend some minutes on the ankle itself, on its stiffness, because that turned out to matter more than anyone would guess. When researchers had older people between 65 and 75 stretch the ankle, half an hour a day, 5 days a week, for just 3 weeks, the range of motion opened up, and along with it came better balance, a quicker step cadence, less time spent lingering in that vulnerable double support phase where both feet are down and the body cannot correct, and a faster walking speed overall. 3 weeks. A stiff hinge, patiently oiled, and the whole gait downstream of it improves. So sit, loop a towel or a band around the ball of your foot, and gently draw the toes towards you, feeling the stretch run up the back of the calf, and hold it, and breathe, and do not force it. This is the least glamorous thing in the whole program and one of the most quietly powerful. Now, none of these alone is the answer. This is the last place I want to correct the old comfortable picture, and it is the most important correction of all. The strongest medicine is not any single exercise. It is the combination. When the researchers pooled 10 trials, some 648 people, and asked what kind of program moved the needle hardest on falling, the answer was the integrated one, the program that braided together 3 strands at once. Strength for the muscle, core work for the trunk that stabilizes everything above the hips, and balance training for the nervous system that has to catch you. Woven together, that combination produced an effect so large it dwarfed any single ingredient on its own. And the dose, once more, the same patient refrain. Programs that ran longer than 32 weeks, better than half a year, produced a benefit several times larger than programs that quit before 12 weeks. The short programs barely registered. The long ones changed lives. You are not looking for a 6-week fix. You are looking for a new ordinary, a thing you simply do, the way you brush your teeth without asking anymore whether it is working. And that balance strand, that is where the old art from China earns its place at the bench, not as mysticism, but as a superbly designed training of exactly the quality we said was failing. Slow, deliberate weight shifting from one leg to the other, controlled, single leg loading, the constant gentle challenge to the system that decides where your center of mass is and whether it sits safely over your feet. When they gathered 24 trials, more than 5,000 people, that practice cut the risk of falling by about a quarter. It sped up the getting up and walking test by more than half a second. It let people hold a single-legged stand for nearly 10 seconds longer than before. And in the Portland trial, the 256 people between 70 and 92, half doing this practice 3 times a week for 6 months, the risk of suffering multiple falls dropped by more than half. At the end, only about 28 of every 100 in the practicing group had fallen, against 46 of every 100 in the stretching group. And the injurious falls, the ones that break something, 7 in 100 against 18. You do not have to take up the whole formal art, but the principle inside it, slow controlled shifting of your weight over one leg at a time, deliberately balancing at the edge of your steadiness and catching yourself, that principle you can practice standing at your own kitchen counter, fingertips resting on the surface, lifting one foot, holding, breathing, setting it down, lifting the other. Look at what we have built here, almost without noticing. We started this whole long evening with a comfortable and cheerful idea that a person keeps their legs by staying busy, by walking, by not sitting still, and that the low rates of true muscle disease at 65, only 5 in 100, proved the plan was working. And piece by piece we watched that comfortable idea come apart in our hands. Not because it was foolish. It was never foolish. It was simply incomplete, blind to the fast fibers it never asked to work. Blind to power that fades before strength does, blind to the half-second catch that walking never rehearses. And now, in its place, we are holding something sturdier, something that knows the enemy by name and answers it in kind. Speed answered with speed. Fading power answered with deliberate, quick, honest effort. A stiff ankle oiled, a slow fiber woken, a nervous system taught to fire together and to catch the body before it commits to falling. Let me take you somewhere for a while. Picture a city in the American Northwest, green and rainy, and a plain room with a wooden floor, sometime in the middle of the last decade of the century I am imagining as our present. In that room there are 256 people, all of them older, the youngest around 70, the oldest past 90. Somebody had the good sense to ask a simple question, the kind of question that sounds almost too humble to bother with. They split these people into two groups. One group was asked to do gentle stretching, the ordinary reaching and holding you might do to feel limber. The other group was asked to learn a slow, flowing kind of movement that came out of China a very long time ago, a practice of shifting the weight from one leg to the other, turning, sinking, rising, the arms drifting through the air like they are moving through warm water, 3 times a week. For 6 months. That is all. Nobody was lifting anything heavy. Nobody was sprinting. To an outside eye, it might have looked like the least athletic thing in the world. A room of older folks moving as if underwater, unhurried, patient, almost dreamlike. And here is what happened. And I want you to sit with the size of it. At the end of those 6 months, the group doing the slow flowing movement had a little more than half the risk of falling more than once compared to the stretching group. Say that plainly. Cut the danger of repeated falls roughly in half with nothing but slow, careful weight shifting done a few hours a week. When they counted heads, only about 28 out of every 100 in the flowing group had fallen at all, while in the stretching group it was closer to 46 out of every 100. And the falls that actually hurt somebody, the ones that break a wrist or a hip, those drop from around 18 in 100 down to about 7 in 100. Fewer than half of the injuries that send a person to the hospital and start the whole cruel unraveling we talked about hours ago. Now why? That is always the question worth chewing on. Why would moving slowly, of all things, protect a body from the fast catastrophe of a fall? It seems almost backward. If falling is a sudden event, a half-second emergency, why does the cure look so leisurely? And the answer is one of those quiet, satisfying things that makes you nod in the dark. When you shift all your weight onto one leg, slowly, and hold there, and feel yourself sway, and correct, and sway the other way, and correct again, you are not testing your strength. You are rehearsing your balance under load. You are teaching the ankle, the knee, the hip, and the whole nervous system underneath them to talk to each other constantly, to make 1,000 tiny corrections, to know exactly where your body is in space when only one foot is holding you up. And that skill, knowing where you are and catching yourself before you tip, that is precisely the skill a fall demands. The slow practice is a slow motion version of the very emergency it protects against. It runs the drill again and again, gently, until the catching becomes automatic. And this was not a one-time fluke in one rainy city. When people later gathered up 24 of these careful trials, pooling more than 5,000 participants, the pattern held its shape. The slow-flowing practice cut the risk of falling by roughly a quarter across the board. It made people faster on the little test where you stand up, walk a short distance, turn and sit back down, shaving off better than half a second, which in that test is a real and meaningful chunk. It let people reach farther forward without losing their footing. A couple of centimeters and more of extra reach, which sounds tiny until you remember that reaching forward off balance is exactly how so many falls begin. And it let people stand on one leg far longer before wobbling, nearly 10 extra seconds of single-legged steadiness. 10 seconds. That is the difference between catching yourself on the edge of a curb and going down. 2 things about that finding delight me. The first is that it got better the more you did it. The people who practiced 3 times a week or more, and who kept at it until the hours piled up into the dozens and past 100 total hours of practice, got the strongest protection. This is not a pill you take once. It is a skill you accumulate, like learning an instrument, where the fingers slowly stop needing your permission. The second thing is that a particular older style of the practice, a broad, low, deliberate style, seemed to outperform a newer, smaller, quicker style, which tells you the protection is not magic and not mysticism. It is in the mechanics. It is in how low you sink and how fully you commit your weight to one leg and how long you dwell there making corrections. The more honestly you challenge your balance, the more balance you are handed back. I love this because it closes a loop we opened a long time ago tonight. Remember the co-activation, the way an aging ankle tends to fire the muscle in front and the muscle behind at the same time, both of them clenching, bracing, unsure, a body arguing with itself and wasting its own power in the argument. The slow practice is, in a very real sense, a way of teaching that argument to settle down. When you sink your weight onto one leg over and over in a calm and unhurried way, the nervous system slowly learns that it does not need to panic and clench everything at once. It learns which muscle to trust for which moment. It learns to relax the brace and let the correction flow. You are not just building tissue. You are retuning the conversation between the brain and the leg, and a quieter, better timed conversation is a safer one. So we have speed on one side, the quick and honest chair rise, the fast heel lift, the deliberate step, all of it waking the fast fibers and the fading power. And we have the slow flowing balance on the other side, teaching the body where it is and how to catch itself. And you might think those two things pull in opposite directions, the fast and the slow, but they do not. They are two halves of the same repair. One rebuilds the engine, the other rebuilds the steering and the brakes. A car with a strong engine and no steering is not safer. It is more dangerous. You need both. And the beautiful thing is that both were sitting in reach the whole time, in a chair and an open patch of floor, asking almost nothing of you but your patience and a few honest minutes a day. Now let me put one more stone into this foundation, because I do not want you thinking any single piece is the whole answer. Somebody looked carefully at just the calf, the muscle at the back of the lower leg that lifts your heel and quietly pushes you off the ground with every step. They took a group of healthy older men, average age around 73, and asked them to do nothing more exotic than heel raises at home. 3 sets of 10, 3 times a week, for 8 weeks, but with one instruction that matters more than all the rest. Come up fast. Push the heel up as quickly as you can, then lower slowly and with control. And at the end of 2 months, the speed at which their calves could generate force, the sheer quickness of the push, had climbed by about a fifth compared to men who did nothing. A 21% gain in the rate of force. From heel raises, in a kitchen. And here is the part that should make you sit up in the quiet. When they looked at the muscles, they had not really gotten much bigger. The architecture had barely changed. So where did the improvement come from? It came from the nerves, from the wiring. The body had simply gotten better at calling upon the muscle it already owned, firing it sooner, harder, more together. This is the thing we keep circling back to all night long. So much of the weakness that creeps into an older leg is not a loss of the machinery. It is a loss of the signal that drives the machinery, and the signal, unlike so much else in this life, comes back when you ask it to. You are not always rebuilding the muscle. Sometimes you are just reminding the body it still knows how to shout. And it is not only the fast push. The stiffness matters too, and it also yields. Someone took older adults, 65 to 75, and had them simply stretch the ankle, working that hinge where the foot meets the leg, half an hour a day, 5 days a week, for 3 weeks. Just 3 weeks. And the ankle loosened, the range of motion opened up, and along with it the balance scores rose, the walking sped up, the steps fell into a better rhythm, and the time spent with both feet planted, that cautious shuffling double support that marks a frightened gait, shrank. Because the ankle, remember, is where the whole sit-to-stand begins its lift-off, and the ankle is where a step lands and rolls and pushes off again. A stiff ankle is a small tyranny that quietly rules the whole way you move. Oil that one hinge, and doors open all the way up the chain. So now let me take you somewhere unexpected. Away from the laboratory, away from the leg press machine, out into a park in the morning in Portland, Oregon. Picture a group of older people, some of them well into their 80s, moving very slowly in the cool air. They are shifting their weight from one foot to the other. They are turning, reaching, sinking down a little, rising up again, all in this soft, deliberate, unhurried way. It looks like nothing at all. It looks like the gentlest thing in the world. And here is the joke of it. This slow, quiet, almost lazy-looking practice turned out to be one of the most powerful fall prevention tools anyone has ever measured. Somebody ran the experiment properly. 256 older adults, all of them between 70 and 92 years old. They split them in two. Half of them practiced this Chinese art, the slow-flowing one, 3 times a week for 6 months. The other half did gentle stretching, which is a fair and honest thing to compare against because stretching feels healthy too. And then they watched, and they counted the falls. And the difference was not small. The people doing the slow-flowing practice had 55% lower risk of falling more than once. Cut the danger nearly in half. At the 6-month mark, only about 28 of every 100 people in the flowing group had fallen at all, while 46 of every 100 in the stretching group had gone down. And the falls that hurt them, the injurious ones, 7 of 100 in the flowing group against 18 of 100 in the other. That is a remarkable thing to get from people moving slowly in a park. And I want you to sit with why it works. Because it is not magic and it is not mysticism. When you move that slowly, deliberately from one foot to the other, you are spending long stretches of time balanced on the edge of your own stability. You are holding yourself right at the boundary where the body has to correct, and correct, and correct again. You are practicing over and over the exact thing that a fall demands of you, but in slow motion, where you have time to feel it and time to catch it. You are teaching the ankle and the hip and the whole quiet committee of little muscles to keep negotiating with gravity. And when they pooled all the studies together, 24 of these trials, more than 5,000 people, the same story held up. The risk of falling dropped by about a quarter across the board. The time it took to get up from a chair, walk a short distance, turn around and sit again, got faster by about 7/10 of a second. How far a person could reach out ahead of themselves without toppling grew by almost 2 3/4 centimeters. And how long they could stand on a single leg, that fragile little test of everything, stretched out by more than 9.5 seconds. 9.5 extra seconds of standing on one foot. In older bodies, that is the difference between catching yourself and going down. And notice something. The more they practiced, the better it got. 3 or more sessions a week beat fewer. The benefit kept climbing with total hours all the way up toward 144 hours of accumulated practice. There is no shortcut hiding in here, no single perfect morning that fixes everything. It is the drip, drip, drip of the daily thing. The body is not persuaded by intentions. It is persuaded by repetition. So let me pull the threads together now, because we have taken the old comfortable idea apart, and it is time to see what stands where it used to stand. The walking was never wrong. Let me be clear about that, because I do not want you to leave your morning walk out on the sidewalk feeling betrayed. The walking is good. It is good for the heart, good for the lungs, good for the head, good for the mood, good for the slow twitch fibers that carry you patiently through a long day. Keep it. But the walking all by itself was answering a question the body was not asking. The body, up around 65 and 70 and 75, is not mostly worried about endurance. It is worried about the fast fibers thinning out. It is worried about power, that quick marriage of force and speed that fires when a foot catches on a rug. It is worried about the ankle that is quietly stiffened, and the explosive push out of a chair, and the half-second correction that keeps a stumble from becoming a fall. And a slow rhythmic walk speaks to almost none of that. What speaks to it is a different kind of practice, and by now you can feel the shape of it. You need to ask the muscle to be strong, yes, but more than that, you need to ask it to be quick. You need to load it enough that it has to work, and then let it move fast so it remembers how to shout and not only how to whisper. And you need to do it in the exact patterns your life actually demands. Standing up, stepping up, rising onto the balls of your feet, catching your weight as it drifts sideways. The body learns what you rehearse and almost nothing else. So you rehearse the emergencies gently before they arrive. And this is where all of it converges on something you can do tomorrow morning with things already in your house. Go back to that kitchen chair. Only now you are not testing yourself. You are training. Sit tall, feet planted a little behind your knees, and stand up with intent, briskly, as fast as you can do it safely and under control. That brisk part is the whole secret. A slow grind up out of the chair builds a little strength. But standing up quickly with snap trains the power, the very quality that fades first and matters most. Then lower yourself back down slowly, with control, resisting gravity all the way, because that slow lowering is its own kind of gold. Do a handful of those, rest, do a few more. You are not trying to exhaust yourself, you are trying to remind the fast fibers over and over that they are still needed. Then give some attention to the ankles, that small tyrant we talked about. Rise up onto the balls of both feet, lift briskly, come down slow, do a set, catching a countertop with your fingertips if you need the reassurance. When somebody had older men, average age around 73, do exactly this at home. 3 sets of 10, 3 times a week, lifting as fast as they could. The speed at which their calf could develop, force climbed by about 21% in 8 weeks. And the muscle itself barely changed size. It was almost all in the nervous system. The wiring got quicker. The body remembered. Then a little balance, on the edge of your own stability, the way the people in the park do it. Stand near your counter, shift all your weight onto one foot, and just stay there, negotiating, wobbling, correcting. Then the other foot. That is the single leg time you are trying to grow. And a little core, because the trunk is the mast that the whole rig hangs from. When somebody combined all 3 of these, the strength work, the core work, and the balance work, into one integrated program, the effect on fall risk dwarfed anything you get from a single ingredient alone. The number they got for that combination was enormous compared to any one piece by itself. The body is a whole thing. It falls as a whole thing. It has to be trained as a whole thing. And the dose, the boring essential dose. 2 good strengthening sessions a week is enough to move the needle. A couple or 3 sets of an exercise, not many repetitions, but with real effort behind them. That is the strength side. And the balance and the ankle work you can sprinkle through nearly every day, because it is gentle and it asks little and it gives a great deal. But the thing you cannot cheat is the calendar. When they looked at how long these programs needed to run, the short ones under 12 weeks gave you a small, polite little benefit. The long ones, past 32 weeks, past half a year, gave you something many times larger. There is no version of this where you do it hard for a fortnight and then coast. The decline is a slow drip, and the answer is a slow drip, and the only way the second drip beats the first is by not stopping. So consider what has quietly happened to us over these hours. We started with a person walking the neighborhood every morning, feeling virtuous. And we believed, along with them, that this was the whole answer. And it was a good answer to the wrong question. Underneath the comfortable story there was a machine thinning out its fastest fibers, losing its power faster than its bulk, stiffening at the ankle, forgetting how to fire in that critical half second. And walking, lovely as it is, walked right past all of it. But none of what we uncovered is a sentence. Every single crack we found in the old idea turned out to be a door. The fast fibers shrank, but resistance training grew them back by nearly a quarter in people in their 70s. The power faded, but quick, deliberate movement woke it up. The ankle locked, but 3 weeks of patient stretching freed it. Every loss we named came paired, if you looked, with a way back. Let me take you to Portland, Oregon, because something happened there that I find genuinely lovely. Somebody gathered 256 people, all of them between 70 and 92 years old, and split them into 2 groups. One group did gentle stretching, the sort of thing that feels sensible and calm and does no harm. The other group did an old moving art from China, done slowly, 3 times a week, for 6 months. And then they simply watched to see who fell. Now, if you had asked me beforehand what a slow, quiet, almost meditative practice could do against the hard arithmetic of aging muscle, I might have shrugged. It looks like nothing. It looks like people wading through honey in a park. But at the end of 6 months, the people doing that slow art had a little more than half the risk of multiple falls compared to the stretchers. Put it in plainer terms. By 6 months, about 28 in every 100 of the moving group had fallen at least once. In the stretching group, it was 46 in every 100, and the falls that actually hurt them, the injurious ones, the ones that break a hip and change a life, those ran at about 7 in 100 for the movers and 18 in 100 for the others. So the quiet art, the one that looked like nothing, cut the dangerous falls by more than half. Why would that be? What is hiding inside all that slow waving of arms and shifting of weight? I will tell you what I think is hiding in there, and it connects to everything we have been circling all night. When you move slowly and deliberately from one foot to the other, and you hold, and you turn, and you sink a little and rise again, you are spending long, uninterrupted seconds standing on one leg, while your body quietly asks the ankle, the knee, the hip, please keep me from tipping over. You are rehearsing, over and over, the exact skill you need in that terrible half second when the rug catches your toe. You are teaching the machine to sense where it is in space and to answer fast. It is balance practice wearing the costume of a dance. And this is not one lucky study in one city. Somebody later gathered 24 separate trials of this same art, more than 5,000 people all told, and pooled them together. Across all of them, the practice reduced the risk of falling by about 24%. The people who did it could rise from a chair, walk out, turn around, and sit back down almost 7/10 of a second faster on a standard little test. They could reach farther forward without losing their footing, by something like 2.5 centimeters. And when asked to simply stand on one leg, they held it, on average, more than 9 seconds longer. 9 seconds. That does not sound like much until you remember that the whole catastrophe, the trip and the grab and the save or the fall, is decided in less than a single second. 9 extra seconds of balance in the bank is an enormous reserve against a threat that arrives in a blink. And, as you might guess by now, the people who practiced more got more. 3 or more sessions a week did better than 1. And the benefit kept climbing as the total hours piled up, all the way toward around 144 hours of cumulative practice. It is that same stubborn second drip we talked about, the one that wins by not stopping. So we have the slow art for balance. But I do not want you to think the answer is only to sway gently in a park, because we spent hours establishing that the real thief was the fast fiber and the vanished power, and swaying does not fully repay that particular debt. Let me hand you the rest of the toolkit, and let me keep it as plain and doable as I can, because a truth you cannot act on is just a decoration. Consider the humble calf raise. Standing up, rising onto the balls of your feet, coming back down. A child does it waiting in line. Somebody took 34 healthy men, average age around 73, and had them do this for 8 weeks. 3 sets of 10, 3 times a week, in their own homes, no laboratory, no fancy machine. But here is the one instruction that mattered, and it is the same instruction hiding underneath everything we have found tonight. On the way up, they went as fast as they possibly could. Not a slow grind, a quick, deliberate push like the floor were briefly hot, and after 8 weeks of that, the speed with which their calf could generate force, the rate at which the torque came on, improved by about 21%. Now catch the beautiful part. When the researchers looked at the muscle itself, it had barely changed. It was not meaningfully bigger. Its internal architecture had not rearranged. The muscle was almost the same lump of tissue it had been. What had changed was the message. The nervous system had learned once again how to call on that muscle quickly and completely. The improvement was not in the meat, it was in the wiring. And that tells you something hopeful and strange at once. Some of what we lose with age is not the muscle rotting away. It is the body forgetting the command, and forgetting can be undone with practice far faster than tissue can be rebuilt. Which brings me back to why the weakness ran ahead of the wasting all night, why strength fell 2 to 5 times faster than mass, why the numbers never quite added up if atrophy were the whole story. Underneath, the nerves themselves have been retreating. Over the years, the body loses whole motor units, those little teams of one nerve fiber and the muscle fibers it commands. Some of the fast fibers, cut off from their nerve, get quietly adopted by slower nerves nearby, reshuffled into new groupings, rewired into a slower, clumsier arrangement. So part of the aging weakness is a wiring problem, a communications problem, a fading of the signal and a scrambling of the lines. And a wiring problem, unlike rot, answers quickly to the right kind of practice. That is why the fast calf raise bought 21% in 8 weeks without growing the muscle at all. You are not rebuilding the instrument. You are retuning it. Now bring in a simple elastic band, the kind that costs almost nothing and lives in a drawer. Somebody took 90 older adults, average age nearly 67, and had them train at home 3 times a week for 8 weeks, 3 sets of 15. Every group got stronger in the knee, reliably, measurably. The ones who worked with a particular slow lengthening emphasis, letting the muscle stretch out under load, actually grew the muscle thickness by almost 9%. The band group grew it by about 4%. And that same rise, walk, turn, and sit test we keep returning to improved by about 1/3 of a second, and it held at the follow-up 3 months on. A drawer, a rubber band, a chair, and your own body. That is the whole shopping list. And do not neglect the ankle, because we caught it stiffening early in our investigation, locking up, refusing that forward flex it needs to let you tip over your toes and stand. Somebody had older folks, 65 to 75, spend half an hour a day, 5 days a week, for just 3 weeks, patiently stretching that joint. 3 weeks. And the ankle gave up more range. Their balance scores rose. Their steps quickened. The time spent lurching with both feet planted, afraid to commit weight to one leg, shrank, and they walked faster. All of it from unlocking a joint we had written off as simply old. So let me gather the pieces into something you could actually do, without a gymnasium, without a trainer, without leaving the room you are probably lying in right now. The chair remains your best friend, but you use it with intent, rising as briskly as you safely can, because the brisk part is the medicine. A couple of proper sessions a week, 2 or 3 sets, somewhere around 7 to 9 hard repetitions of a movement genuinely difficult for you, is the dose the best evidence keeps pointing to. The band for the knees, the fast calf raise for the ankles and the wiring, the slow-moving art for the balance in the bank, and a little daily patience spent stretching the joints we let seize up. Not all in one heroic afternoon. A little, most days, for a long time, because the studies are stubborn on this point too. The programs that ran past 32 weeks moved the needle on falling many times more than the ones that quit before 12. The benefit is not in the intensity of a single burst. It is in the refusal to stop. I want you to notice how far we have traveled from where we began. We started with a comfortable sentence, stay active, keep moving, and we honored it, and then we watched it fail to explain a single one of the hard numbers. And now, on the far side of all that doubt and collapse, we are not left with despair. We are left with something better than the comfortable sentence. We are left with a set of specific, humble, almost laughably ordinary things. A chair, a band, a slow dance, a wall to steady you while you rise on your toes, and the quiet knowledge of exactly what each one is repairing and why. So let me gather all of it into one place. The way you would gather tools off a bench at the end of a long day and set them where your hand can find them tomorrow. We learned that after your 50th year, the muscle quietly gives back 1 to 2% of its mass each year, and that the strength leaves faster than the mass, 2 to 5 times faster, which was our first clue that this was never a simple story of shrinking meat. We learned that the part of you which vanishes first is not the whole muscle, but a particular kind of fiber, the fast one, the type 2 fiber, 29% smaller in the man of 71 than in the man of 23, and that a slow morning walk, lovely as it is for the heart, barely wakes those fibers at all. That was the crack in the comfortable sentence, and once the crack opened, everything poured through it. We found that the survey of 915 Koreans aged 65 to 75 said the thing out loud that nobody wanted to hear. Meeting the aerobic guideline, 2.5 hours of moderate movement a week, showed no significant link to holding off sarcopenia. Only the targeted strength work did. Skip the strength exercise even once a week, and the odds of sarcopenia climbed by a factor of 2.6. The walking was never wrong. It was only incomplete, and incomplete in exactly the place where falling lives. Because falling does not wait for you to be strong or weak in the slow, patient way. Falling happens in under half a second, in the instant a toe catches the edge of a rug, and what saves you there is not strength but power, force multiplied by speed measured in watts. And power leaves you earlier and steeper than strength does. The mobility limited older person has lost something like 95% of the leg power of a middle-aged one. Power, not strength, was the better predictor of how fast you walk, how fast you rise from the chair, how fast you climb the stair, and whether you go down. That was the collapse of the old idea, complete and total. Stay active could not touch the fast fiber, could not touch the what, could not touch the half-second catch. And then, on the other side of the ruin, the evidence handed us back something kind. The 16-week trial where two groups lifted the very same weight, and the only difference was that one group moved it fast, and that group gained 84% more power. The 12-week trial where the chair rise time improved 44% faster. The light load, 40% of your maximum, moved with intent, doing more for real life than the heavy grind ever did. You do not need to strain against something enormous. You need to rise from the chair as though you meant it, quickly on the way up, and settle back down slow. That single change, speed on the lift, turns an ordinary motion into medicine aimed precisely at the fiber you are losing. We looked hard at the plain miracle of standing up. The three phases of it: the lean forward that borrows momentum, the lift off where the weight transfers to your feet, the extension where hip and knee and back push you up against the whole pull of the earth. And we saw how the aging body cheats, leaning further forward to steal momentum it can no longer make with the legs, the ankle gone quiet, the muscles fighting one another instead of pulling together. The chair stand repairs that fight. The heel raise, done as fast as you safely can on the way up, wakes the ankle. We saw the 8-week trial where that simple rise onto the toes lifted the rate of ankle torque by 21%, and did it not by growing the muscle, but by teaching the nerve, which tells you the wiring answers faster than the flesh, that some of this comes back in weeks. And we saw that the best result of all came not from any single exercise, but from braiding 3 strands together: the strength, the core, the balance. 10 trials, 648 people, and the integrated program stood far above the rest. We saw the old Chinese art, the slow dance, cut the risk of multiple falls by better than half, 28 in 100 falling against 46, and we understood at last that it was never mysticism. It was balance rehearsed 1,000 slow times until the body stopped having to think about it. So here is the whole of it. Small enough to carry. Rise from a chair, quickly on the way up, slowly down until you can do it many times without your hands. Rise onto your toes against a wall or a counter. Fast up, slow down, and feel the ankle remember its job. Step up onto a low stair with intent. Loop a band around your leg and press against it, and move through the slow dance, the shifting weight, the single steady leg, until standing on one foot while you pull on a sock is no longer an adventure. 2 or 3 days a week for the strength. A little balance most days. And the one ingredient the trials insisted on above every other: time. Past 32 weeks, the falling numbers move many times more than in the programs that quit before 12. Not a heroic afternoon. A quiet, ordinary refusal to stop. You will not feel it working, not at first. The fast fiber thickens in silence. The nerve learns to fire a fraction sooner and sends you no announcement. The what returns without ceremony. You will simply notice, one distant morning, that you rose from the low chair without the arms, that you caught your balance on the wet tile and did not think about it, that the bus doors were still open when you reached them. And you will not connect it to anything, because the body keeps its bookkeeping to itself. That is the strange and gentle truth we arrived at. The legs do not weaken because the years demand it. They weaken because we ask so little of them, and the asking, it turns out, is a thing entirely in our hands. Somewhere in you tonight the fast fibers are waiting, patient, not gone, only quiet, listening for the one signal walking never sends, and ready, whenever you are, to answer.